catch you.
This conference will now be recorded.
Looks like we got a minute and a half to go. Are we ready, Michelle? I mean, are
We
you
are
ready?
Yep, we can.
Okay.
I was just going to do a little bit of a sound check,
Yeah,
but
you go right ahead and do that.
John, can you give us a thumbs up if you can hear us? Thank you.
Mike, can you hear me?
I can hear you, Ron, loud and clear.
Okay, good.
And council, if you want to turn Ron up, you turn him up on your white microphone or on your white speaker there.
I'd love to turn Ron up. How you doing, Ron?
Pretty good.
Good. You sound great.
Yeah, thank you. It's just going to take a little time, yeah.
Well, considering the fact that we can't see you, you look even better.
Yeah.
Hurry back, Ron.
Yeah, I'm going to be down there just as quickly as I can.
Great.
I just feel a little too unsteady to even walk in there tonight, so.
Are we ready, Michelle?
Yep.
We're live. All right, it's 7 o'clock, everybody. We're going to call the meeting to order. Please call the roll.
Alderman Kittle.
Here.
Alderman Breeze. Alderman Weinmeier.
Here.
Alderman Montello.
Here.
Alderman Volkert.
Here.
Alderman Kraft.
Here.
And I have Mayor Horn absent.
All right, please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, adoption of the agenda.
I make a motion, we adopt the agenda.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Hi.
Motion carried. Public comments. Anybody wish to make a public comment? If you want to approach the microphone, just state your name and.
Mike Stry. I will have some questions down as the things go, so I was wondering if I have the right to ask the questions once the agendas are going along.
And I want to be sensitive to that. We had a super long agenda. I don't know if there's another way to facilitate that. Know if somebody has some questions, is there another way to facilitate that?
Yeah, I mean, if there's questions you'd like us to address when we get to that item, I don't know if do you have any of your questions written out, Mike?
No, yeah, I got, because some of the questions or the things that are on there, I'm not sure what is going to be said about them.
Sure.
Some of it may not be a question, it's just, that's the way it is. But like the whys or, did you think of this or something, that may pertain to a decision that is going to be made.
Okay, so I actually think, and I appreciate that, I think what would be helpful is, because those are kind of general philosophy questions that I'm hearing from you, the philosophy of what's being done, that's what I'm saying. And so, do you mind just writing it down, hand it to Noah, and let's make sure that your questions get answered during the course of the evening when we get to that point?
Okay.
Okay, is that all right?
Sure.
All right, I appreciate that. Anybody else wish to make a public comment? All right, hearing none, consent agenda.
Motion to approve.
Motion's been made and seconded to approve the consent agenda. All in, roll call or all in favor?
All in favor?
All in favor, please indicate so.
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign, motion carries. All right, we are to new business, 7.1, resolution awarding the sale of $3,625,000 general obligation corporate purpose bonds.
Good evening, council. On the phone with us this evening is also Sean Lenz with Ellers, who assists us in the sale of the bids. Let me move this up just a little bit more. Can everybody hear me now? Okay. And actually, in your packet tonight, there is a final resolution, the sale day report. So the initial bonds, which Sean will cover as well, we had intended to issue 3.6 million. Because of a premium that we received today, we were able to reduce that bond amount down to $3.3 million. But I will let Sean cover kind of the bids that we received and the favorable results of that. But I just want to highlight, in advance of going to the market, we did have a rating call with Moody's as part of the process. That occurred at the end of July. The rating call is really an opportunity for us as staff to provide information that addresses any questions that the rating agency has of us, but also allows us to highlight our management of the resources that we're entrusted with, the financial policies of the council, and all of those things that you can't necessarily articulate in a financial statement document. So with that, at the end of our call, we did ask consideration for Moody's to upgrade us. There were several key factors, including our improved fund balance increase from 2.6 million in 2017, which was our last rating call, to 3.6 million in 2020. Our tax base growth of 36% over that same period of time. The reduction in overlapping jurisdictional debt of the school district by 50%. And then also just general reduction of our GO debt outstanding by $2 million over that period of time. So with that, Moody's did find us in a very, very favorable spotlight and did issue that increase or that upgrade in our rating, which directly translates into the bids that we can receive and obtain a better rate, which Sean will address. We went from an A1 to a double A3. So I want to thank the council's guidance over that last 5 years with your policy, along with our staff for their fiscal stewardship as well. And with that, I will turn it over to Sean to go over the sale day report.
Before you turn it over to Sean, so I want to make sure I heard you right. So we were talking about 3.625, and you're telling me it's something less than that.
It is because of our reoffering.
So what is the number?
It is 3.3 million.
Even.
375?
3,375. I don't want to misspeak on it either, so let me pull it
7.5, it looks like. 3.375.
3,375,000.
Okay.
Great. This is Sean. Thank you, Rayanne. Should I share my screen to show the pre-sale report, or will you guys have that up on the screen there?
We'll bring it up on the screen, Sean.
Okay, great. So I too would like to congratulate the council and the city on this upgrade. It does reflect the work that you've done over the last couple years in terms of financial planning, your debt issuance, and fund balance policy. And this increase in rate in rating from the A1 to the double A3 is one of the more meaningful ones, even though it's only one step by going from the A category to the double A category. That brings potential additional bidders who require that you're at the double A level into the mix, and typically can have one of the larger increases or decreases, probably better said, in interest rates. So with that, Rayanne, is it up now? And Mr. Acting Mayor, Mike, is the, oh, there we go.
It's there.
Okay, I see it now. Thank you. So we put out for bid originally the $3,625,000 at 10:30 this morning. And what you have on the screen right now is the bid tabulation. And we did end up getting 5 bids, which is great to see. Very competitive bidding. Winning bid from Piper Sandler and Company out of Minneapolis with a 1.225 or 26% interest rate, true interest rate. And to the question about the size of the issue, I'll point this out here for the group. The 2 things we ask of the bidders is that they provide us their interest rates and they provide us a price. And if you look at the bid from Piper Sandler, the price is $3,855,000, but we were asking for $3,625,000. So they gave us what we call a premium bid, and because they are paying more upfront to the city, we take that excess funds that they're providing with that premium bid, and we can use it to reduce the amount that we have to issue to fund the same projects and to refund the debt that we were choosing to refund with this issue. So with that, that's how we were able to reduce the size of the issue from $3,625,000 down to $3,375,000. And if you go maybe a couple pages back, if you would, to the right after the bid tab, there's a landscape page, which is the debt service and repayment. We're in the.
Yeah, you mean going forward,
It's coming.
Sean, going forward. You said going
Oh,
back.
I'm sorry. Yeah, I apologize. I was thinking page numbers backwards rather than forward. Yep. Okay. So is there, in the sale day report, is there a debt service schedule that's in a landscape form that's in the report to the council that you have here?
I'm scrolling through. There's just a slight delay. Sorry, Sean.
No, understood. No problem.
Well, there's a debt service schedule, but it's not in landscape form.
Yeah, the sale day report was 13 pages, and I can reference something different if it's easier for the group, or as I'd mentioned, I can share my screen if that's easier too. Happy to do that.
Sean, I think we're just going to give you permission to share your screen here quick.
Okay. All right. Okay. All right, hopefully everyone can see, and I'm going to try to enlarge this. This is the exhibit I was referencing. This one was in the pre-sale report, and what I wanted to reference in terms of that premium is when we did the pre-sale report, we were expecting the $3.6 million plus issue, and we had interest payments of about just under 400,000 with that. And with the bid today, the cost of interest over the 15-year period is higher, but because than was in the pre-sale report, but because we received that premium bid, the amount of principal that we have to issue is now lower. And overall, most importantly, this total principal and interest, which is what the city will be paying over the next 15 years, is around $100,000 lower. So by going from a preliminary interest rate of about 1.67% down to about the 1.26%, that translates to about $100,000 total P&I less than what we planned in the pre-sale report. And then in terms of the repayment sources, the streets and the police portion are being paid back by the levy, the debt levy of the city. Water will pay water, utilities, sewer the same, and storm sewer the same. And the refunding, which is the last exhibit I'd like to go through with the council, this you're currently levying for this. And with the refunding today, I'll go to that last exhibit. Oops. Currently, the city is levying this to pay back the 2012 issue. It's around $150,000 a year. With the results of the sale today, we now only have to pay back $1 million. So this is primarily where we're using that premium, is to pay this debt off early. So we only had to issue $1 million in new bonds to pay off the $1,195,000. And overall, the city over the next 9 years will pay about $206,000 less in debt service costs than if we had not included the refunding and just continued to pay the debt as it was currently listed and currently locked in. The city had locked into these rates and for this principal amount, but as part of today's transaction, we'll lower the principal amount by using the premium to pay some of this debt off in about a month from now. And the new payments on this refinanced debt will be about $206,000 lower than what they would have been otherwise.
And how about this, Sean? So relative to what the city was paying on the existing debt that's being refinanced, and maybe this is a question for you, Rayanne, from a cash flow standpoint, what is that increasing on an annual basis? How much more are we spending per year when you take into account we're eliminating, if I understood him right, $150,000 in debt service right now?
And up on the screen, Mike, on the far right-hand side, the debt service savings, that kind of shows you the cash flow.
I can't see it, but
It's roughly, depending upon the year, anywhere between $16,000 to $32,000. But in the next 5 years, it averages about $22,000 annually.
and say the part about that, but I got the 22,000 annually, but it's increased. We're borrowing millions of dollars, and our cash flow is being impacted how? Annually.
This is
Mike, are you talking about all of the debt for the city, or are you just talking about this particular issue?
No, Sean, you had made a mention about what our debt service is on this existing loan that I understand is part of, it's a refinance that's part of this offering. Is that correct?
Yeah, right now you're paying, and I've tried to enlarge this. Right now you're paying around $150,000 a year on this issue.
Yep.
And with the refunding, you'll pay about $125,000. So that's where Rand's saying we're going down about $20,000 to $25,000 a year in what we'll have to levy to pay this debt issue.
So from a cash flow standpoint, we're borrowing a bunch of money, and the cash flow savings to the taxpayers is I mean, there's $20,000 to $25,000 a year that is going to be less debt service with this new issuance a year. Obviously, it goes on for a longer period of time, but that's because of the savings with the interest rate that's here. And actually, if I understand right, so Piper Sandler, they're paying a premium Have I got that part right? The 3.855? And so they're paying money for us to borrow, for them to place our, so that premium is money we get to use to apply to what we owe, so we need less money.
That's correct. They pay us that premium. We, under the Wisconsin state law, you either have to put it into the debt service fund to pay future payments when you get a premium on your new issue, or, and this is what we're doing because it's a much, much more efficient way of using those dollars, is we are also allowed to take the money and pay off existing debt that you have. And that's what we're doing in this particular instance, is we're paying off a portion of that 2012 debt issue with that extra money that's in Piper's bid.
So, and in this particular case, when you look at the interest rate, so you see in 22, 23, and 24, you see that 4% number, and folks could be forgiven for not understanding how that gets to 1.2592, but the reality is when you factor in the premium, that's what drives that reoffering yield down to those numbers, and that's really what a person needs to focus on, is what the net interest cost is. Is that correct?
That is correct. And the other way to focus on it here, went back to the last exhibit. When we did the pre-sale report, this column that's in purple, had estimated
binder somewhere. What do you need? The internet password.
Hold on a second, Sean.
Sure.
Lowercase. That should be all right. I don't think I'll need it.
Jeremiah, you might want to mute your microphone. The sound of silence.
Got it.
Thanks. All right, Sean, go ahead.
Yeah, no, sorry about that. So the pre-sale report, the total principal and interest estimated was approximately $4 million. And with the results of the sale, it's $3.9 million. If you go back and you look at the pre-sale report, the size of the issue is that $3.6 million, and our interest estimate was about $370,000-$380,000, somewhere in that range. With the bid, the way Piper bid it, we are paying more in interest than we had projected, but we're paying a lot less in premium.
Sure.
Yeah, or in principal. Thank you. And overall, principal and interest, we're paying about $100,000 less than what we had originally planned. So I think the most important number, to your point, Mike, is this number. What are we paying in total? The bids that we got from the different bidders encompass the price and the rates. And when we mesh those together, also to your point, that's where we determine this true interest cost, when we factor in the price and the rates together. And that's where we get to that 1.26%, even though these rates are higher than that. It's because of that. It's because of that premium being paid and the time value of money. Money today in your hand is worth more than paying more interest later. Is the way the calculation works.
So is it fair to say, Sean, that if this trend continues, next year somebody will actually pay the city to borrow money?
It is interesting how you probably heard too that there are, not in the U.S. yet, but in certain places in the world, there is a negative interest rate to invest your money or put your money some places, because people will pay to have their money be secure even though they're not earning anything on it. It is a really strange dynamic. I don't think we'll ever quite get to that point, but it is as you see these rates get closer and closer to zero, that's inevitably where you end up.
Does anybody in the council have any questions for Sean?
I have a question. This is Tom.
Oh, Tom Linfors, go ahead.
Yep, just in summary, after all that math, can we say that you're borrowing $3,375,000 at an interest rate of 1.26 over a 15-year term?
Yes, you can.
That's what I needed. Thanks.
So the motion we're looking for tonight is awarding the sale of 3.375000 general obligation corporate purpose bonds series 2021B. Is that correct?
Correct, and you
Yes.
can add resolution 022101.
08. You said 02, but that's okay.
I meant 082101 is the resolution.
So if nobody has any questions, I'm prepared to make a motion that we approve resolution 082101, awarding the sale of $3.375 million in general corporate purpose bonds series 2021B.
Second.
Okay, the motion's been made and seconded, and I assume obviously relative to what Sean has laid out for us tonight as far as the presentation goes. Does anybody have any questions? Any further discussion? Please call the roll.
Alderman Kittle?
Yes.
Alderman Freeze?
Yes.
Alderman Weinmeier?
Yes.
Alderman Montello?
Yes.
Alderman Volkert?
Yes.
Alderman Kraft?
Yes.
All right, thanks, Sean. Or is he still with us or is he leaving? Is he done?
I'll
Okay.
be signing off now, but thank you, Mike. Thank you, council. Appreciate it.
Thanks,
Thanks,
Sean.
Sean.
Appreciate it. All right, item 7.2, 2020 Auditor's Report.
Council, again, we have Kim Schultz with us tonight from Baker Tilly. She's going to do the annual presentation on the audited results, so she will go over the 2020 audited financial statements and just the auditor's findings and address any questions that the council has. So I want to thank Kim for being here tonight and turn it over to you.
Hey, thank you. Happy to be here tonight. I'm going to touch on things very quickly in the interest of time. So if you have any questions on anything I skip over, please let me know.
There won't be any math involved, will there?
A lot of graphs and charts with the math. So,
Craig, you're used to that.
So the city's financial statement includes an independent auditor's report. We have issued an unmodified audit opinion, which says that your financial statements are fairly presented in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles. We also call that sometimes a clean opinion. The opinion also discusses management's responsibilities and the auditor's responsibilities for the financial statements. I have that on slide 2. I won't go over that in detail. The responsibilities haven't changed since last year. I do want to point out there is an additional paragraph in your audit opinion. So if you were to compare year over year, the city did implement a new accounting standard related to fiduciary activities this year. So that did add an additional schedule to your financial statement, which provides more details on your cash collections for other governments, the ins and the outs. So some additional information there, but overall a fairly insignificant change in total. So on slide 4, as was mentioned earlier, and congratulations on your bond rating, your fund balance did increase significantly in 2020 by $882,000. And probably the most significant part of that, so that's the total line on top, and then I have the 3 different buckets of your fund balance below that. The largest increase was in the unassigned category. So those are monies that are not designated or otherwise restricted. So the vast majority of that increase was in that unrestricted category, which is excellent. You did have a small increase in the assigned category, which are dollars that are earmarked for future capital improvements or future projects of the city. So looking at the next slide, we have a quick recap of the general fund financial results. So you did budget a very small use of fund balance, $34,000. You came in again at an increase of $882,000. Your revenues were slightly over budget. It was a difficult year to budget. You did have some revenue sources that were under budget, but the CARES Act funding and some other revenue sources offset those lost revenues, and your expenditures were significantly under budget for things like library, parks, public works, and public safety were all under budget this year. On the next slide, another really great metric here related to your general fund balance. We like to compare the unrestricted portion of your fund balance to your annual revenues to get a sense of how that compares to your annual operations. This year, again, with that nice net income that the general fund had, you are up to 42% of your annual revenues, which is about slightly over 5 months. You have about 5 months of unrestricted or undesignated funds on hand. That is up from about 4 months last year, so that is a nice increase.
Is there a top end number that you would say when you approach that? I mean, just from a practice standpoint?
Yeah, I would say if you start, so we generally recommend maybe between 4 and 6 months is where we really like to see it. If you start getting in the year, up in the close to year, I guess the question would be, should you be utilizing some of that in your budget?
Sure.
So, I think communities that have that much, I think that's pretty rare because there's so much pressure on the general fund. Normally, we don't see it get much above that 5-6 month period, but I think if you start approaching a year, certainly. The other thing to do, I think, if you do find additional surpluses, to really look at if some of those funds should be earmarked or designated for future needs of the city. Because often there are future needs that you can justify holding additional fund balance, knowing that you're going to have needs for expenditures down the road.
I don't know if you know this number off the top of your head, but what's average? What's a statewide average? What's a national average? Is 6 months a lot?
Yeah, so I don't have a statewide average, but on the graph here, I do have some blue dots, which those are a composite of Baker Tilly's Wisconsin clients of similar size. So each year we can take a composite and take an average of that. And that had been trending just slightly above where you were, but still, right around that kind of 4-month time frame. So I think you're pretty, this year with the surplus, I don't think that we're seeing that, across the board. So I think that would put you, real comparable or above where the peer groups
Where we
are.
need to be.
Mhm.
You don't have a 2020 dot on there, do you? Am I missing it?
No, we have a year time lag. When we're done with our 2020 audits,
Got
we'll
it.
compile that for next year. So on to the next slide, just a quick, some of the information about your geo debt had been mentioned earlier, but just to recap quickly, the black line on this chart represents your 5% of your equalized value, the amount that you are allowed by statute to borrow. And the green line is your actual general obligation debt. So you are sitting at 33% of your total debt limit at this point. You've been consistently kind of trending down with that percentage, and I think, again, your bond rating supports that that's a positive percentage for the city.
So again, I want to know if we're normal.
Yes.
Is 48 million and 16 million, that gap, is that relatively normal, or is that?
Yeah, I think
low?
for a community of your size, I think comparable Wisconsin cities, kind of in, if I look at the closest cities in your population, I think you're probably pretty average in there. I did look that up last year, and you were kind of right in the middle of,
Okay.
Kind of the communities of your size.
Okay, good, thanks.
Okay, and then the next slide. This is just one last look at your governmental fund debt service. So this does not include any utility borrowing. We like to look at your debt service expenditures compared to your total non-capital expenses and look at that from year to year. So 2020, you were 26%. That's been very, very steady. Very little change over the last 5 years. That is slightly above what we see from our average kind of client of your size, but I will say that a lot of your borrowing is in your TIF districts, so that will not be paid out of just your general debt service levy. Those funds maybe right now might not have the increment, but should have the increment to pay those off. So I think in that case, having a percentage that is higher than statewide kind of average that we see, I think is a reasonable thing, and certainly this percentage wouldn't raise any alarms at all.
All right, does anybody have any questions? I see that was the last page of your report. Was there anything else you wanted to add?
I just wanted to thank all the city staff for their cooperation and assistance getting through the audit this year. Very prepared, very responsive.
Awesome, thanks, Kim. Does anybody have any questions? All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, second quarter 21 financial report.
We just have a couple of quick slides to go through. The full financial report is in the packet, so if there's additional questions on there, but just again, in the essence of time, and I know the first three items have been financially heavy tonight. So we'll just go over quickly revenues, expenditures, geo debt, and investments in general. So this is a little bit difficult to see from your distance, so I will kind of walk you through, but on the revenue side, the first column is going to be the 2020 year-to-date, and then the middle column is 2021 year-to-date. When we look at this year, total revenues as of June 30th were $4.5 million, which accounts for 65% of budget. Property taxes continue to be the largest revenue driver, accounting for 56% of our annual budgeted revenues. Again, 60% of the property taxes were collected through the second quarter, which is slightly higher than prior years, which are an average of 55%. Another notable revenue driver is room tax collections. In second quarter, they were $26,000, which was an increase of 25% from prior year at the same time. That accounts to $5,000. Intergovernmental revenues were significantly higher compared to prior year, and that's due to the funding received through the American Rescue Plan funds that was received at the end of June, and accounts for that first 50% payment of $493,000. Building permit revenue continues to be very robust as of June 30th. There were $163,000 in collections, which accounts for 68% of the budget. That was a slight increase from prior year of 3.5% or $5,000. Total building permits that were issued as of June 30th were 211, which included 117 new dwelling units. And then the kind of the last bucket that's on your screen is miscellaneous revenues. These are higher than prior year by roughly $427,000, and that's due to the closing on the land sale of the Double G property. Questions on revenues before I go to expenditures?
Just want to ask you about room tax. So is there a lag here?
There is. So in second quarter, we're really only seeing the first quarter reported. So the room taxes are due 30 days following the end of the quarter. So June 30th would be due July 31st.
So really, as I look at that number, we budgeted $100,000, and in essence, that $26,000 is the first quarter of the year. So if I multiply that times 4, that puts me at or slightly above, assuming you have the same rate of occupancy that we did in the first quarter. So that's why that number looks the way it does. That's good. Thanks.
And I'll give you a spoiler alert, but room taxes are trending higher in second quarter. So the room taxes through second quarter or of second quarter were $37,000. So we're slightly above where we were last year. So well on track for budget.
I'd like to just mention that depending on the season, the room occupancy is going to be higher in certain times.
No, I understand there's seasonality to it, but if that $26,000 was through the second quarter, we'd be way off. But yeah, I get that.
Slide, Michelle. Sorry for this one. Can you? So from an expenditure standpoint, we are on track with budget. So as of June 30th, total expenditures were just slightly over $4 million or 57% of budget. Again, when we look at expenditures, we're kind of taking that quarter look, and so we would anticipate total expenditures to be approximately 50% of the budget. Second quarter will always trend a little bit higher over that 50% because there's certain expenditures that occur at the very first half of the year and are not equally amortized over the balance of the year. So for example, our ambulance service fees, those are all paid upfront costs. There's some insurance costs that are paid upfront at the first of the year. So as we move through the remainder of the quarters, they'll start to trend to normal, and we'll start to see those dollar amounts kind of come in line with trend. So although we use 50% as a basis, there's certain variables to one-time expenditures that occur at the beginning of the year that make that number skewed slightly. Other notable aspects from an expenditure perspective is on the transfer outs. You'll see $927,000 in transfers out at the very bottom. Last year there were none. A couple of changes that result in those transfer outs. One, the fire department is now considered a special revenue fund. So there is a levy that occurs, but then those funds are transferred out quarterly and moved over into the fire fund. So those are a portion of that. There is also $273,000 in the American Rescue Plan funds that the council committed to move towards capital projects for the water, sewer, and stormwater projects for 2021. And then lastly, there were $427,000 in the double G land sale proceeds that went and transferred to the capital projects to help reduce our overall borrowing for our capital projects in 2021. So those are the three items that make out the transfers out. Those are not budgeted items, so they show as a variance to the report. And once we exclude those out of the total fund expenditures and we look at year over year, expenditures are pretty much exactly the same as they were last year. Questions on expenditures?
Just, you've got that chart in there twice, second quarter revenues as a percentage of budget. I think you meant second quarter expenses as a percentage of budget. So page 3, that's the same table that's on page 2.
Financial, are you looking in the?
I'm looking at the report that you're going through, but the longer version of it. So I assume you meant to have a graph in there of second quarter expenditures as a percentage of budget. But mine has second quarter revenues as the exact same graph is on there twice.
We'll take a look at it. It might,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Same numbers too.
Yeah.
Same percentages.
Yeah.
So we can.
Hey, Rayanne?
The next slide is just the general obligation debt.
1 second, Tom. Tom Linfor's got a question for you. Tom, go ahead.
Sorry, it was on that previous page of expenditure. Just the culture number, what is that?
So the culture number, that encompasses kind of any type of downtown improvement. It has any type of like minor recreation that isn't classified in either general library or in parks area. I don't know the $6,300 right off the top of my head. I would have to look at our detailed general ledger on that.
Okay. Okay. All right, thanks.
Yep.
Are there any particular variances that you're concerned about at this point?
Not at this point. Everything is tracking very comparable to last year.
Okay.
So there isn't really anything notable aside from the transfer outs that have been discussed earlier.
Does anybody have any questions for Rayanne? All right, no action needed. All right, thank you. All right, Pederson Annexation.
Good evening, Council. Tonight I have the next 2 items that went before our Planning Commission and have recommendations for approval to the City Council. The first one is the Pederson Annexation. The process was it went through the Development Review Committee. There was a public notice in the newspaper. We went to Plan Commission for a public hearing on August 3rd.
I'm sorry, Beth, you want to move the microphone closer? I don't know how well Ron can hear you.
Okay.
Perfect, thank
Can
you.
everybody hear me? Okay. And today
I can hear it. I can hear it fine.
What did Ron say?
Ron said he can hear you fine.
Okay, thanks, Ron. So this was the process. Next slide, Michelle. The site location and the acreage. So it's located directly off of 64. It is 60 acres in size. It's contiguous with the city to the south side, and it runs into the development called Fox Run. So it'll run into that. Fox Run is estimated to go on that northern portion of that. So that's where it's contiguous with the city. It is, we are proposing the zoning to be Z3 zoning district based on our future land map use and surrounding zoning that's currently in place. Currently, it's surrounded by planned commercial or mixed uses with some low-density residential. Michelle? And basically, this went to the DRC and Plan Commission, both recommending approval of the annexation petition for the 60 acres that's currently within Stanton Township, and we would like to have it zoned Z3 as we pull it in. Also, the city staff and the DRC are recommending waiving city annexation fees and paying state fees, as we've done in the past to encourage annexation.
Does anybody have any questions for Beth? All right, so we're prepared for a motion then. Is that-
I would so move to make the annexation. Let me get back to the, for the Pederson annexation.
And
Second that.
as,
Waiving of the fees or
Yes,
paying
and
of the fees.
waiving of the
your
fees.
second as well, Craig.
Yes.
All right, so we have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? Please call the roll.
Alderman Vries,
Yes.
Alderman Weinmeier,
Yes.
Alderman Montello,
Yes.
Alderman Volkert,
Yes.
Alderman Kraft,
Yes.
Alderman Kittle.
Yes.
All right, motion passes. All right, Mill City Flat Certified Survey Map.
Okay, the second agenda item from the Planning Commission was the Mill Cities Flats CSM, which is a certified survey map. The process that we had was it went to the Development Review Committee, Plan Commission August 3rd, and today for final approval before the City Council. The site location, it's located in the midst of Croft, Dorset, and Doman. Okay, those are the three streets that it's off of. It's 4.19 acres in size. It currently has 7 lots. Their proposal is to put all of those lots together into one lot where they have been approved for a conditional use permit for several principal buildings, 3 of those being apartment buildings, 2 of them being garages, and 1 of them being a pet station. Kind of a pet cleaning station. It's very interesting. It's guided for mixed use, and it's currently zone Z3, which is an allowed use for these apartments in that zoning district. Next slide, please. When looking at the CSM, city staff and Plan Commission looks at the lot width, setbacks, stormwater utilities, and park dedication. What we'd like to discuss a little bit tonight is the easements. On the interior of the lot, you can see that there's currently some easements there in place. We will be doing the vacation process for those easements. That is a little time consuming. We'd like to get it approved as is, and when we get the vacations approved, we will submit that to be recorded with St. Croix County. So the vacation process has already been published in the newspaper, and so we've started the process at the September council meeting. You'll see it come before you for a resolution, and then we continue to go through the process. It's about a 90-day process. We would allow the Mill City Flats folks to get started kind of at their own risk, quote unquote. We don't believe there really is any risk in vacating these easements. They've received releases from all of the utilities involved. So currently there are no underground or underground utilities in those easements.
So basically, in layman's terms, we have 7 lots, and we're gonna make 1 lot,
Yep.
and they're gonna build on it. And the apartments, and I think the number I'm familiar with is 88.
Yep, 2
Different-
buildings with 30 units, 1 with 28, and a fitness center.
And just for the sake of it, doesn't have anything to do with this, but we're talking about market rate apartments as you understand it.
We are talking about market rate apartments.
Okay. Anybody have any questions for Beth?
Not for Beth.
All right, then we're looking for a motion to approve that request.
I would make the motion to approve the Mill City Flat Certified Survey Map.
I'll second it.
Motion's been made and seconded. Is there any further discussion?
You have anything to say? Comments? At the Planning Commission meeting, Beth mentioned it a little bit. They have on site, they have a dog washing open to the public station. Like
We have it up on the
what you might
screen.
call. Yeah, there it is. And it's just, I think it's a great idea.
So just out of curiosity, does a person just toss their pet in there and shut the door?
Yeah, as long as you swipe your card.
As long as you put the coins in, then you put the animal in.
I think it's
and you
just a
go.
great idea. I mean, I love that. And the park is going to be for mainly residents, but this is going to be open to the public. It's going to be a little bit outside, so I just wanted to bring that up. I think that was a great idea.
I'm just curious how long it'll be until somebody steps inside and says, I'm going to take the wash and wax. But okay. No, it's kind of interesting.
But that's okay.
Yeah,
As long as
there
they
it
pay their money, as long as they swipe their card.
All right, any further discussion? Please call the roll.
Alderman Weinmeier,
Yes.
Alderman Montello,
Yes.
Alderman Volkert,
Yes.
Alderman Kraft,
Yes.
Alderman Kittle,
Yes.
Alderman Breeze.
Yes.
All right, motion carries. Moving on, 7.6, the Beebe Building, Phase 2, ESA and Hazardous Materials Assessment.
Good evening, members of the City Council. As you recall, earlier this year, we approved a contract with Short Elliott Hendrickson, SEH Incorporated, to do both a Phase 1 and Phase 2 environmental site assessment for the Beebe Building. They completed the Phase 1 study earlier this year and just recently concluded the Phase 2, as well as a hazardous materials assessment. I sent the full reports out to the council. It's 150 pages
It was
long.
great reading, great reading.
A lot of, the asbestos sampling test results, a lot of it may read like a different language as you look through it. In the packet, I included the executive summary, and then we do have John on the meeting virtually here this evening, and I believe we may have Jeremiah Went as well, who may be available to answer any specific questions you have. In terms of, notable, findings, the Phase 1 indicated there may be up to 6 underground tanks on the site. As part of the Phase 2, they kind of dive deeper into looking at the actual asbestos sampling, soil borings, and so the executive summary just kind of highlights some of the findings. There really is nothing notable that would warrant additional investigation. It is something that as we move towards seeking bids for abatement and demolition, this report would be included with the bidding documents for contractors so that they know that there is asbestos in the building. These underground tanks would have to be addressed when they would be excavating the foundation. So with that, I wanted to turn it over to John if you'd like to unmute yourself. And if there's anything, I just provided a very high level overview, but anything notable that you'd like to mention to the council.
That's a pretty good summary, I would say. I did the asbestos inspection and the Phase 2 work on the site last month, and as you said, we just finished the report. I think it was last week for you. As far as the asbestos goes, it was a pretty typical, the building's been added on to over the years, so there's a lot of different materials I had to sample, but as far as actual detections, it's a pretty typical number that you'd find in a building such as this, and probably the most significant one is the pipe insulation and boiler insulation throughout most of the buildings that are added on to one another. Otherwise, there's some flooring and some countertops, but the pipes insulation will probably be what the asbestos company will pay the most, or the abatement company will have to take the best care of. As you said, as the Phase 2 work, there may well be some underground storage tanks that were never removed from the site. On one boring, we hit what was a void. I can't say it was the tank body, but we hit a void of some kind. And so there well could be some tanks that were abandoned in place and are just under the ground there. And they would have to be handled and according to regulations when they're encountered. As far as contamination in the soil, there's low levels of kind of long chain hydrocarbons, but nothing above soil standards. There's also low levels of lead, I think, in every sample that we collected and analyzed. And I think that's likely just naturally occurring lead. It was at so low concentrations. But nothing above state regulatory standards for anything that we analyzed. So I guess in my mind, the next step would be to probably prepare plans and specifications for the demolition, as you said, including the asbestos HMA document in the report so that the contractor knows what he's going to have to remove before he tears the building down.
Hi, John. This is Mike Montello. I just see in this conclusion, I think it's really important, and you've mentioned it, Noah mentioned it. It talks about that a number of items have been identified that'll need to be addressed, none that are unexpected given the age and history of the site. So I think just kind of as a conclusionary statement, there's nothing there that surprised you that it was there. And again, you're saying that in terms of what we would consider toxic building materials, if that's even the right word, hazard, I don't know, there's a better word probably to use. But there's nothing that was out of the ordinary in terms of what you encountered.
That's right. It was a pretty typical result of the inspection, in my opinion. I've done buildings where there was a lot more asbestos than on this building, and the pipe insulation is pretty much throughout the lower parts of the building, and that'll have to be addressed. But it's not something that these people don't do every day when they do a building like this.
All right, so does anybody have any questions for John?
John, I got a question. I don't know if you know the answer, but usually the responsibility, if those tanks had to be dealt with, the financial responsibility would go to the buyer or the seller?
I don't know for sure. I think the person who owns the building, when they're removed, and if that's you, that's who it would be, would be responsible. I don't know for sure.
That'd be part of our contract with, that we would be responsible for the tanks?
Yeah, so the agreement with the Gerard Corporation would be that the city would be responsible for all
Clean
costs
site.
with demolition, any type of abatement that would be needed.
Okay, so as far as, on terms of budgeting, where are we at with, are we on budget with what we've budgeted for the cost of this? Are we over, under, whatever?
Yep, they're on budget with the phase 1, phase 2, and then we would be taking the results from this and hope to obtain funding from the state to help bring down the cost for the abatement piece as well. So to say, here's what we found, to see if the state could cover a portion of those costs.
And in order to get help from the state, whether it be a grant or whatever it is, we needed to do this anyway, correct?
Yes.
Thank you.
All right, so no action requested tonight. This is really just an update.
Correct. Yep. And if members of the council have follow-up questions, feel free to reach out. We will put a short update on our city website. You know, there's a lot of interest in this project, so we have drafted kind of a short update that will be put on the city website. And as we continue this fall through the process of redeveloping this site, we'll continue to post updates on there for the public.
Okay. Unless anybody has anything further, we're going to move on. Item 7.7, County Library Tax Exemption. And Monica, I just got to say, you've been on the job a couple months now?
2 months, yes.
And we haven't been formally introduced.
Sure.
So Monica Lavold, is that how you say your last name?
That is.
And that's our new library director. And so welcome to New Richmond. Good to have you here.
Good to be here. Yeah. So, library county tax exemption. This is the annual resolution that comes before every year that you agree. There's a minimum appropriation amount that the library needs to be funded, and then once we meet that, then the county will fund at their levels. The preliminary number that I have from St. Croix County is dependent on the Hudson Joint Library and their funding. Assuming that that all goes forward, the preliminary number that needs to be funded from the city is $234,732. So we're probably well above that, and safe to say we don't need to have the residents pay tax because you're funding the library above that number.
And really the way you just said that, if I understand you correctly, we would have to spend that much to qualify. Correct. So the fact that we're in excess of that
Correct.
Just means we've met the threshold that it takes to qualify for that.
Exactly.
All right. Does anybody, go ahead.
Approve resolution 08-2103,
Second that.
county tax.
All right, motion's been made and seconded. Any further discussion? Please call the roll.
Alderman Montello?
Yes.
Alderman Volkert?
Yes.
Alderman Kraft?
Yes.
Alderman Kittle?
Yes.
Alderman Vries?
Yes.
Alderman Weinmeier?
Yes.
Motion passes. All right, 7.8, Riley Avenue one-way discussion. Noah.
So as the council's aware, we've been reconstructing East 8th Street this summer as part of our 2021 street and utility projects. As part of that conversation and redevelopment or reconstruction of the streets, we've had several conversations with the school district about how we can improve traffic flow and safety of students walking or being dropped off and picked up from school in this area. If any of you have driven in that area around 3, 4 o'clock, you know that traffic is oftentimes backed up onto East 11th Street. You have some students that are being picked up and walking a block. You have, it's entertaining in a way to just watch traffic and pedestrian flow there. And so we've had a lot of conversations to look at how do we improve that, and most importantly for the safety of students. And so one option that we're looking at is actually converting Riley Avenue into a one-way street northbound, which basically would allow for hopefully just having that traffic going just one direction, and potentially 2 lanes would also help prevent backup on East 11th Street. The school district is supportive of this. We have sent out letters to homeowners over in that area, and we do have a neighborhood meeting scheduled later this month. We really wanted to bring this just so the council was aware of these discussions that were going on. We weren't, there's a couple options that the council could consider this evening in terms of action. We're hopeful that whatever we come up with for a final design would be in place before the start of the school year. And so, a couple of things that I think you could consider doing with that in mind. One would be that, staff would come back to the work session meeting later this month with a recommendation. The other option would be, depending on the feedback that we gather from the neighborhood meeting, if there is a clear consensus without strong opposition from that neighborhood, the public works director could proceed to already begin to, order the appropriate signage and get that work started a little earlier. So it's really at the discretion of the council if you'd like us to bring it back for formal action at the work session, or if you'd feel comfortable authorizing staff to proceed and just providing the council with an update. So mailings went out. We have heard from a couple of residents. And obviously there's about 9 homes on Riley on the west side of the street. So we're not looking tonight to necessarily approve and say that is the design. We do want to gather that feedback. It's really a question for you if you'd like us to come back and bring that to you for a formal vote, or if you'd prefer that staff go ahead and proceed based on the feedback that we gather.
Well, I want to ask, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say my comfort level is that it comes back to the council. I would like to hear what the feedback is from the public meeting. I have heard from a couple of homeowners. I actually drove through there today. I think I'm allowed to drive through there. I don't know. There's a couple signs that said local traffic only, but and it looks like some of the risk and safety issues have been mediated by kind of closing off the street, and you can only then turn left on, you're gonna have to help me on the street name.
Yeah, I don't know, Michelle, if you're able to zoom in a little more.
So East 9th.
Okay, East 9th,
South of the
okay.
tennis courts.
Yeah, so I don't know if you'd call it dead ending it, of course, but that gets rid of the issue of people driving through and dropping off at the parking lot, which I'll admit was a tactic I might have utilized in my daughter's middle school years. But yeah, there's only 9 homes there, and they will be greatly impacted if we were to reduce this to a one-way. So I can't imagine moving forward without giving their feedback a lot of weight.
I agree. I've heard from other residents also around that area. And I will agree that it can be a mess certain times of the day and certain times of the year. And we maybe need to look at some safety aspects, but it would be detrimental to the people that live there unless we can find some kind of way to make it temporary one way, I know that doesn't make much sense, but for 2 hours it's one way, I don't know. I think we need to come up with ideas, and I wouldn't feel comfortable making a decision either way without a lot of feedback from the people that are really going to be impacted, and including the school. I'd like to see them in on this conversation also.
So what you have on your photograph there, that red zone, they're really kind of to the east side of the south side of the tennis courts. What does that represent? Is that the drop-off zone?
So currently that you can drive through that area. You will no longer be able to do that as part of the.
Actually can't. anymore. There's curb and gutter.
Yeah, so curb was just poured in the last couple of weeks, so you can no longer drive through there.
So that street's closed there.
Yes.
And that's part of the permanent construction for that area. I'm sensitive to the comments, Carrie and Craig, both of you have made. It is my understanding that the school is desirous that this becomes a one-way street. So that's, and so
It's my understanding that the people that are living on that street every day have desires for it not to be. That's just my.
yeah, and we'll find out from public input. I think it's kind of interesting. We took a street on the north side and turned it into a one-way street, and it seems to function just fine. I think sometimes people, but we'll find out. So it sounds like what your marching orders are is get us the feedback, we'll bring it back to the work session, and we'll go from there.
Yep, and if council members have, Eric Evenson's was out of the office here this week, but if you have follow-up questions for him, feel free to reach out. Still checking his email, I think, periodically, but otherwise he'll be back in the office next week.
And Mike, just to a quick point, when that road was made to a one-way road.
Yeah.
I knocked on every door that was on that road, and astonishingly, nobody had a problem with it. Not one person had a problem with it, that literally either faces or is on that street. And I talked to every person that it affected, and I was shocked when nobody said, that's a terrible idea.
Yeah, and the feedback's super important. I just think it's interesting. We're talking about 2 blocks.
Yep.
And obviously, whatever construct we can come up with that improves safety and puts the residents in a livable situation, I'd certainly endorse. So, all right. So when are they?
We can send out the date and time to all the council. All of you are welcome to.
Yeah, I'd
attend
like
that
to be
if you'd
there.
like. So I forget whose district that's in.
Mine.
Is that in your? Okay.
Yes.
Is it really?
Yes.
So we'll make sure all of you have that information and are certainly welcome to attend. The design that you see on here is the preference of the school district. So we've had just separate meetings just with them. They'll also be invited, obviously, to that meeting as well. So.
All right.
And I actually wonder that with the curb being across there where that street is closed now, I mean, you can't get through. I am curious as to if that's going to make the safety issues stronger or less. Because now, instead of somebody coming up what was, sorry, my eyes are failing me. I think it's 11th Street. No, sorry, go the other way, 8th Street. Coming up 8th to Riley and coming through, I mean, all the way through. Now you would be driving up the 9th, coming across, and really have your heavier traffic that comes from the north directed into kind of the heart of where the drop-off zone is. So there's definitely some challenges there, but yeah, let's find out what folks think. I think that's a good idea.
We'll put
and
my
I would-
at the work session here later this month.
Yeah.
And I would like feedback from law enforcement on this also.
Yeah, if I can, I just had a quick question. I don't know if it's been addressed or not. But if they do make that Riley into 2 lanes going northbound, does the school offered any type of how they're going to have kids drop off? Because if you're on the west side, drop a kid off and they scooch across the east side northbound traffic, I think that potentially that could be a tragedy waiting to happen. So I guess I don't know if the schools address that or not, but that would be one of my, I guess, initial major concerns there.
Well, and also utilization of crossing guards. I know that the elementary schools use them, and I know that they're utilized in a couple different locations in the city, but I'll be honest, in the 3 years that my daughter attended school there, I didn't see a single crossing guard. So I do think that there are still opportunities for the school district to take a more proactive approach to ensuring safety there as well.
I'm just curious, Craig, maybe you'd know this. Is there ever been an incident there?
Not with anybody being struck, but there's a lot of incidents there where people are complaining about the length of time. The more of the incidences are down on Double G with cars.
Correct.
You know, coming from
Backing up.
the eastbound, trying to make a left-hand turn to go on
Riley.
on Riley, excuse me, and then, you know, that's where we get the kind of those incidents. I believe we've had a few minor collisions in those situations, but more it's just people expressing their frustration, getting stacked up on East 11th Street between there and Star Elementary, kind of getting it double whammy, where they get hung up in traffic to get down to Billmar or whatever the case may be, or to get out to Hillside. You know, they get stacked up there pretty regular. So
It's an expanding area, and it's going to even expand more when we put Help me with the name of the new development that we haven't started yet.
Mill City.
No, all the way down.
I don't
Double
know.
G and 140th
140th.
project. There's another 80 houses there. Yeah, that meadow. You know, it's,
Hey,
we even get busier.
They're
So
going
we
to
have
skip
to
middle school, Craig? They're going to go right from elementary to high school?
right into high school. Good. That'd be
what
good.
the
Hey, Noah?
district is, what the school district is seeing too is just fewer kids riding the bus, fewer kids walking. With COVID, fewer kids using the bus this past year. There's always safety concerns nowadays with if your child were to get kidnapped going to school. So it's a lot more vehicles, parents dropping off and leaving than what even just 5-10 years ago.
And the buses don't drop off on that road at all.
Correct.
Well, I would make a recommendation that you include law enforcement in any of these discussions, whether it's Craig or someone from his department.
Absolutely.
Tom, did
Hey,
you have a
Noah?
question?
I do. No, where's that meeting on the 17th? Is that going to be at the Civic Center?
I will confirm that with you, Tom. I think it is here, but I'll double check and I can send you an email afterwards, just so if you'd like to attend.
Thank you.
All right, any further discussion? Any other questions? All right, thank you. Let's go on to 7.9, Electric Department Transformer Purchase.
So per our purchasing policy, because of the cost of this project, this comes to the City Council for final approval. This went to the Utility Commission at their most recent meeting. The recommendation would be to proceed with the purchase of 2 3-phase transformers for a total cost of $27,286. Basically, we keep some inventory of transformers. Now looking at the lead time of some of these, it's really trying to make sure that you strike the right balance of what you have in inventory and what you need for some of the upcoming projects. So between Caribou Coffee, Dakota Meadows, the Mill City Flats project that was approved tonight. So the recommendation would be to proceed with that purchase.
I'd make a motion to proceed with the purchase of 2 3-phase transformers for the total cost of $27,286.
Second?
We have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion?
Yeah, just a little bit. I was on a committee meeting and, we looked at a lot of other options as far as rebuild and really felt like this was absolutely the best way to go. So Utility Commission approved this.
And it is fair to say that with the way things are today, just-in-time inventory is probably not a good idea because we're finding that just-in-time, there's no time like the present to have certain things. So, all right, any further discussion? Please call the roll.
Alderman Volkert,
Yes.
Alderman Kraft,
Yes.
Alderman Kittle,
Yes.
Alderman Vries,
Yes.
Alderman Weinmeier,
Yes.
Alderman Montello.
Motion passes. 7.10, Declaration of Surplus Property.
We have 2 vehicles that we would be looking for authorization from the council this evening to declare a surplus property. One is a 2005 Dodge Ram 2500, currently used in the electric department. The other is a Dodge Durango used by the fire department. So the plan would be to list both of these on the Wisconsin Municipal Surplus Auction website here in the coming weeks. So the recommendation from staff this evening would be to declare these 2 trucks as surplus property.
I'll make a motion that we declare the items as surplus property as presented in the memo.
I'll second it.
Motion's been made and seconded. Is there any further discussion?
Will these items have a reserve on them, or we're just going to take what we can get?
At this time, we haven't discussed having any type of reserve listed on there.
What are your estimates, Mike?
Good question. I really haven't looked at them, but I will say this, that the used car market's been historically strong. Whether or not that'll continue for the next 6 months or a year is anybody's guess. But it's not a bad time to be having something for sale. I just wanted to mention that your motions, per the memo, are including some signage. If you read that paragraph below, there's old plastic signs that
We
were.
did update signage here in the Civic Center. This was something if all the offices here have a new nameplate, we wanted to bring that also to the council. If staff wanted their nameplate as a keepsake, otherwise we would just be discarding those. There's no value with those.
That was definitely a part of my motion.
Sorry, I did overlook that. So
All right.
I don't nominate staff. We didn't want to just tell staff, sure, take that. We want to make sure we go through the proper channels with the council.
All right, please call the roll.
Alderman Kraft,
Yes.
Alderman Kittle.
Yes.
Alderman Vries.
Yes.
Alderman Weinmeier.
Yes.
Alderman Montello.
Yes.
Alderman Volkert.
Yes.
All right, moving on to 7.11, fire station security cameras.
So we have a recommendation this evening to proceed with a contract with CWS Security out of St. Croix Falls for installation of security cameras in the fire station in the amount of $8,943.05. We've been adding security cameras to the Civic Center, to the police station. It's something that I think you're only going to see more of going forward. For liability reasons. And so we would look to move forward with that this evening. Installation would be here by the time they order equipment, get installation, it'll likely be sometime early September. But I wanted to thank Jeff Swanson, who's been assisting with operations, very knowledgeable with security cameras, sat in on some of the demonstrations with our 2 vendors that we had reached out to, and really confident in this product. Does include a 3-year warranty. It's also consistent with the cameras that we use at the police station. So it is nice to have this similar product line when it comes to questions that may arise.
So Noah, this is in addition to the badging kind of in and out system that was installed there?
Yeah, so we have key fobs currently were implemented earlier this year at the fire station. So to enter into the building, you have to swipe your card. This would be the actual video cameras positioned outside or inside the building.
Okay.
Make a motion to approve the contract with CWS Security in the amount of $8,943.05.
There's a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any additional discussion?
So I just have one question about budget. Was this a budgeted expense for 21, or is this something that was additional and added in?
So this was not included in the original CIP. However, we felt that it was important to address it. There is a security system currently in the fire station that was just installed by members of the fire department.
Okay.
Really doesn't have several years old, is outdated, and really felt it is important to have so this would replace the current system that's there.
Okay, so how is this being paid for?
So some of our capital purchases for so far through 2021 for the fire department are under budget, so we would look to still include it in that.
Any additional questions? Please call the roll.
Alderman Kittle.
Yes.
Alderman Vries.
Yes.
Alderman Weinmeier.
Yes.
Alderman Montello.
Yes.
Alderman Volkert.
Yes.
Alderman Kraft.
Yes.
All right, motions passes. We are to 7.12, Ordinance 559, Fire Board, Police and Fire Commission, Public Safety Committee.
So members of the City Council, I will walk through a little bit of the red line version included in your packet. Ordinance 559 really makes some revisions in terms of roles and responsibilities of the Fire Board, the Police and Fire Commission, and the Public Safety Committee. This is really just putting in what has really been our practice over the years and really just codifying that in the city ordinances. So the section 1, and if you'd like to follow along, just notes the residency requirement. So we did replace Economic Development Commission, is now known as Ford New Richmond, and then added the Fire Board into that as well, because obviously we have representatives from the surrounding townships. Section 2 addresses the Fire Board in particular, identifies the membership of each of those groups, notes that the appointments, if there's a vacancy, that position is filled by that appropriate governing body. So if there's a vacancy from the city, the mayor would appoint, and that'd be confirmed by the council. The town or village chair would appoint their representatives as well. In terms of functions, the Fire Board serves as an advisory board, providing recommendations to the Public Safety Committee and or the City Council. We did note some of those matters primarily are going to be annual and long-term operating and capital budgets of the department, maintaining a cooperative and constructive relationship between the department, other services, and governmental entities. So if there's a mutual aid agreement, for example, with a neighboring village or township. and then making recommendations regarding short, long-term needs and goals of the department. And then finally, letter C under that section, the fire board may elect their own chairperson, may establish meeting schedules and rules subject to requirements of state law and city ordinance. Section 3 is really just adding some additional context to the Police and Fire Commission, just so that it's consistent with state statute. This really isn't changing their roles or authority. That's all, again, in state law. And then Section 4 finally is just clarifying the role of the Public Safety Committee. And again, this is not changing anything. We have 3 members of the City Council who are appointed to that each year. And they really can focus on a wide variety of topics. And we note in here animal control, emergency management, fire safety inspections, traffic concerns, licensing for special events, other public safety issues. The authority of the Public Safety Committee does exclude that of the Police and Fire Commission. So again, the Police and Fire Commission does hiring, firing, promotions, demotions. They're not a policy-making body. So that's really the summary of Ordinance 559. Happy to answer any questions that you may have, or Nick, if there's anything you'd like to add to it.
Yeah, no, I think Noah's done an excellent job in working through this ordinance. The goal here has simply been to clarify roles, expectations, and make certain that it's absolutely clear in our ordinance what the roles and responsibilities are for these bodies. And while, ultimately the statute describes what the Police and Fire Commission does, for example, we don't have anything codified in the statute, in our ordinance, that refers to the Police and Fire Commission. Similarly, with respect to public safety and the Fire Board, we have these committees. They're constituted, they act on behalf of the city, but there's nothing in the city code that defines who they are, what their makeup is, or what their roles or responsibilities are. So I think Noah's done an excellent job at really putting definition to these entities within the city, defining how it is that appointments are made and who gets to serve on the committees, and then ultimately what their roles and responsibilities are.
Does anybody have any questions for Nick or Noah?
Make a motion to approve ordinance number 560.
And it's actually 559.
I'm sorry.
You're ahead of yourself. And suspend the rules?
Yes.
Okay.
I'll second it.
Motion's been made to adopt ordinance 559 and suspend the rules. Is there any further discussion? Please call the roll.
Alderman Vries?
Yes.
Alderman Weinmeier?
Yes.
Alderman Montello?
Yes.
Alderman Volkert?
Yes.
Alderman Kraft?
Yes.
Alderman Kittle?
Yes.
All right, that passes. 7.13, ordinance 560, Fire Department.
I'll, similar to the last ordinance, I'll just kind of walk through any of the additions or red lines in this section. And this is more in particular to the fire department itself. So under section 34-25, it establishes that the Richmond Fire and Rescue Department is a department of the city of New Richmond. The department consists of the fire chief and such supervisory and other fire department positions as deemed advisable by the chief and approved by the common council with feedback from the fire department. We did note under section 4, the fund appropriation, the common council with feedback from the fire board. Again, the fire board does not have the final say on when it comes to appropriating funds, but we do want to make sure that, again, that those decisions are included in their feedback because, again, they are paying and own a portion of the equipment. Under section 5, fire department personnel, just again clarifying that all fire department compensated personnel are legally considered as employees of the city of New Richmond, regardless of pay structure. They are afforded coverage under the city of New Richmond worker compensation and liability insurance policies. All fire department employees are subject to the employee handbook, and they're also subject to fire department standard operating guidelines. So these would be in the Lexipol policies, which are reviewed and approved by the Public Safety Committee. Firefighters are appointed by the fire chief. subject to the approval of the Police and Fire Commission. And that's in accordance with state law. So in the past, the fire department has had elections and or made appointments without approval from the Police and Fire Commission. So any officer appointment should be confirmed by the Police and Fire Commission.
Can I help you out there? It's not should be, has to
Has
be.
to be, yes.
And actually, we need to add Police and Fire Commission in there, because if you read the language, it says deemed advisable by the chief and approved by the Common Council. Well, the Police and Fire Commission's not in there. So it's the last of that first paragraph there.
I'm under letter 5.
No, I'm under number 1. I'm sorry, at the beginning of Ordinance 560, it says generally. If you look at the language there, so go to the very beginning and then go to the end of that paragraph, right there, the red line part. As deemed advisable by the chief and approved by the Common Council. Well,
So these would be, this is really in regards to more of the structure of the department. So under 5, under personnel, and then under, when it comes to the officer section, under section 6.
Yep.
That's really for the PFC.
I understand. Okay. So the first part is relative to kind of en masse, but who those individuals are is through the Police and Fire Commission, excuse me.
And it's, would require approval from the council because those are paid positions. And so the fire chief shouldn't just say, okay, I want 5 assistant chiefs, and that has a budget impact, obviously. So that would be the reason for having the approval from the Common Council, where the PFC is really tasked with filling those positions, so.
And I want to ask you, I know that, and it's Mike, right? Yeah. Did your questions get addressed?
So for probationary firefighters, yeah. Right, so it'd be, so whether it's an officer or whether it's proposing to the PFC who the new probationary firefighters, or if it's a probationary going to non-probationary status, that would all be a recommendation from the chief going to the police and fire. Now, what the process would be, like if say there's an open officer position, whether the chief wanted to do interviews or what that selection process would be at the discretion of the chief, but they would bring that recommendation to the PFC. So there wouldn't be a vote of the members of the fire department.
And just for the record, that is exactly the way it works in the police department. Right, Chief?
Yeah, that's correct.
Right, Mike, anything else? Okay. Oh, well, I think we're close to being done unless anybody's got any questions.
So I think I just kind of addressed this next point, but then going to the number 6 there when it comes to the officers. So again, the fire chief at their discretion may appoint supervisory officers in the fire department, subject to the confirmation by the Police and Fire Commission. In terms of the sections that you see redlined here, back on the first page, under 5, what was organization is now fire department personnel. The membership structure is removed from that. Again, that with firefighters are not members, it's not a club or an organization, they are employees. So really any reference to a member of the department really needs to be removed. And on the next page, when it comes to department to adopt bylaws, again, that section is removed as well. And then under letter 6 there, again, it identifies first and second assistant chiefs, eligibility for office of chief or assistant chief, and again, notes elections when it comes to secretary and health and safety officer. So again, there really are no elections when it comes to an employee position that's compensated. And so the chief, if they want to include firefighters on a selection committee to help him make that recommendation, that he can do that. But
He or she.
He or she can do that. However, it's no other department functions that way of, we're going to vote who gets paid for a position. And each of these officer positions has a job description with minimum qualifications, and those all have to be ratified by the PFC.
Yeah, there are really two sides to the clarifications here on this particular ordinance. The first is the operating side, the operating structure, operating as a department within the city of New Richmond, consistent with the other departments within the city. So when NOAA references elections and references how other departments work, the fire department is going to operate consistent with the other departments within the city of New Richmond.
Was that a question?
Well, it's been a question in practice, and so there have been some practices that are not consistent with the way other departments work. So that's being changed in the code. And then the other side of that, the second component is just making sure that this ordinance is actually compliant with the statutes that govern fire departments and govern really the hiring, the firing, the promotion of employees within the fire departments, to make sure that it's clear that there is compliance. And there was confusion and there was question in the practices. As Noah noted, the Police and Fire Commission alone has responsibility for the hiring of chiefs, for the discipline of chiefs, for the approval of appointments. Yes, the chief recommends from the department, but ultimately it's the Police and Fire Commission that has the authority to appoint and to approve these promotions. So much of what you see here is drafted for consistency of operations within the city and compliance with the statutes that govern fire departments within the state of Wisconsin.
Yeah, it makes sense to me, the clarification. I guess I was just surprised when they just referenced that, we had to spell out that the New Richmond Fire Department is a department of the city of New Richmond. That, I'm just surprised by that.
Well, and
I've always known it to be. I guess that's why I was surprised.
In the state, there are different types of fire departments. Fire departments are formed in different ways. They can be departments of municipalities. They can be standalone entities. They can be fire districts. And over time, with the agreements that have been drafted, and even in the way in which the ordinance was reflected, there were inconsistencies in the way the fire department has been identified. That doesn't mean that it hasn't been a department of the city of New Richmond. And in fact, it's been treated as a department of the city of New Richmond, dating back to the 40s or the 50s. In practice, we've always operated as a department. However, the language of the ordinance, the language of some of the agreements with the towns hasn't been as crisp or precise as it should have been. So, I think we all sit here and say, yes, it's a department, it functions as a department. This is an effort to clarify the language to ensure that it is absolutely clear in our ordinances and there can be no question that the fire department is a department of the city of New Richmond.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, so that's just clarifying again that, it kind of goes back to, again, a volunteer versus an employee. So again, it's not a true volunteer fire department because members are compensated. So it is declaring that it's a municipal fire department.
Mike, if you could have those people that are making comments.
Ron, hang on a second. Mike, Ron, hang on a second. Mike, come on up to the microphone. Ron can't hear you.
Where the volunteer comes in is, as the city goes, I'm required to show up for work. Volunteer, I don't have to come in to make that call. That's where part of the volunteer comes in. And then also all the other functions that you volunteer for. So now as an employee, now am I required to show up and do what is asked of me to do? And then also, losing that volunteer part, we may end up losing grants because now we're not a volunteer fire department.
So on the grant component, as someone who's done a lot of the grant writing in the past for the fire department, I don't see that as a concern for the ordinance change itself. Because really in practice, again, this section of our ordinance hasn't been updated for many years. So again, in practice, it has been a municipal department. It's really just clarifying it in the ordinance. So I wouldn't have any concerns on the from a grant seeking perspective. In terms of status as an employee, while I understand that it is different than it's not a 40-hour-a-week position where you have set hours. But again, it goes back to our members of the fire department employees, or are they true volunteers? And there are examples of true volunteer departments in Wisconsin. In some cases, they're not compensated at all, or they're reimbursed gas mileage. When we look at our operating budget for the fire department, even outside of the chief, we spend over $200,000 a year on compensation for employees of the fire department. That really moves beyond a true volunteer standpoint, which would just be either you'd get an annual stipend or you may just be reimbursed your mileage. So it is, now I would say New Richmond is unique in that it's a little bit of a hybrid because we do have we previously had a full-time chief. There are departments that don't have that. But obviously there are departments that have full-time, it's a fully staffed, paid on premise. I mean, there's a lot of different configurations, obviously. But it is really this, changing the volunteer to the municipal fire department is really just clarifying what we've actually had in practice.
Okay.
Is that it, Mike? Okay, thank you. Anybody else in the council got any questions or anything they want to say? Well, yeah, walk up to the microphone, please.
Just with touching back on the grant stuff, is that something that we have like a concrete, yes, you guys will still be eligible for like the DNR grant? I know that is one grant that we get quite a bit of money from. Has that been confirmed that if we are no longer labeled volunteer?
Again, so the ordinance doesn't change what we've actually been doing. So as someone who has written that grant, that's not a concern to me of this.
Okay, so I want to make sure that we, as far as getting the grants and the funding in that aspect, we don't end up losing out because we rely a lot on the grants and also our fundraising because the budget's not quite there for what we need on the norm. And then just asking as far as with the chief being able to appoint officers or whatnot, I know that some of the things were redlined as far as time on the department and whatnot, and talking about state minimums for what classes. Are we going to continue forward with those minimums needing to be met?
No, let me interrupt you for a second. Would you just, for the record, just state your name?
Jocelyn Cahonen.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
And I think, if I may, that's really not a question that we can answer tonight.
Okay.
Because it's the chief's going to make recommendations based on practice, I guess I'll say, throughout the state, and it's up to the Police and Fire Commission to ratify those decisions and decide that, what the standards are. So as the council, that's not something that we do in terms of approving who gets to be in that chair when it comes to whether it's the chief or the officers. That's a recommendation by the chief, however, whatever manner that person does that, and then that is ratified, if you will, by the Police and Fire Commission.
Okay, so I guess just my question being with that is our current interim, I know that we made some allowances for continuing education to get to the point of being able to be chief in the state of Wisconsin. So I was just questioning as far as with officers go. I know we have a lot of members that are wanting to become officers, but don't quite have those. And if we're going to have open positions, just kind of curious as to who's going to be making calls.
Yeah, I can't answer that in terms of statute. I'm not sure, Nick, I'm going to ask you to. I think this is really a discussion to have with the chief. As to the names that person will put forward, and I'm going to say him because we're talking about an individual today. It doesn't necessarily always mean it will be But then the rationale for that, and I get your question, I think it's a good question, but the rationale for that, again, is going to be ratified by the Police and Fire Commission when they make those decisions. So whatever the statute calls for, and I'm not going to begin to tell you that I even have I haven't looked at the
Quite a few of
statute.
them.
Yeah, statutes, yeah, good point. But that really will be up to, in keeping with state law, the chief, and then what the PFC decides.
Let me also add to that there are the way in which an officer position is structured is dependent upon what that person is required to do. And so, for example, for a person to be incident command, that person has to have specific training. And so some of this is structure in terms of how the council would like the fire department to be structured, how the chief would like the fire department to be structured, how, ultimately everything is proceeds and progresses to the Police and Fire Commission as well. So there's not, as we sit here today, there's not one bright line answer that says for a person to serve as chief, he or she has to have X, Y, Z qualifications. That process is one that, frankly, needs some development and needs some development in conjunction with the chief as we look to identify the specific roles and responsibilities of these various positions.
Well, and I think that what I'm understanding you to say, Nick, and I guess I have understood this, the idea of what a fire chief does for a department is not statutory.
And it's not universal across
I guess
fire
that's
departments in
really what I
Wisconsin.
meant to say. And you can have a fire department set up that the chief's role is not, and I don't want to get into the weeds, but is not certain things. And so the rationale of that stuff, I think those are conversations for later time. This doesn't address that. It really is just, and I think, Noah, you did a good job of explaining what we're trying to do. And I think, Mike, relative to your question, nobody's changing anything in terms of, you say it's a volunteer fire department. Well, if you've been on the fire department for a long, long time, have been employees of the city of Richmond for a long time. And so to say it's a volunteer department, that whole employee thing, that gets into just the structure throughout the state in terms of what is volunteer. And it doesn't have to do with, okay, you're an employee, you have to be there. That's not what has to do with that. So I think that I understand the questions, and I think they're good questions, and they may be a bit philosophical in nature in terms of structure. Some of it, there's some latitude there for sure. So this is just to clarify really how the program, how the department is set. This doesn't begin to be all-encompassing. It's way too short. And we have a city attorney that if he got his hands on that, it would probably be because they get paid by the page. This would be 40 pages long. So with all due respect, Nick. Anyhow, so.
Let me also say we've drafted it broadly intentionally. It's drafted so that decisions can be made. You'll see, for example, under number 6, which is stricken and rewritten to one sentence, there are certain requirements that were removed from number 6 because perhaps they're not compliant with the law, but perhaps they also disqualify people who would be good candidates to serve as officers at lieutenant, captain, assistant chief levels. And I think in large part, we want to create a structure or allow for a structure that allows for appointments subject to the approval of the Police and Fire Commission so that, we can ensure that we've got a good solid structure that allows for the development of individuals throughout the fire department, similar to what we have in other departments within the city. So it is drafted more broadly. It's not an exclusive policy by any means. It's drafted so that there can be flexibility and so there can be opportunities to develop a structure that works for the fire department.
Can I just say that certainly has already been something into place by the support and opportunity to continue our education to gain certain levels of education and knowledge to become an officer, a chief, an assistant chief. So, while I understand the idea of trying to make it
dare I say, easy for people to be able to step into these roles, those classes are important, and that learning and education is important to put the dedication and time in, because not to be melodramatic, these are people's lives at hand. So just because I want to try a different color helmet on today doesn't mean that I'm qualified for it yet. I have to put in my due time. So that is one thing that does have me concerned with keeping it a little bit more open, as if we were the city department. It's a very different thing. I certainly have no business going with Mike Stry on trying to work on a transformer. This wonderful young lady has no business coming in and walking in and being on a fire department and going first out on a truck. You have to have the experience and the knowledge, and those classes are very important for all of your families, and everybody else's safety. So,
I think it's a valid point, and I just want to say this, that the time for the particular, if you want to say going into the weeds on those things is not tonight. I think it's valid. I think that I don't want to speak for everybody sitting here, but I'm going to. We are all interested in having the most effective fire department we can, just like we are interested in having the most effective police department that we can, or ambulance service. So I think your comments carry some weight. It's a discussion for another time, just relative to what we're doing tonight.
Absolutely.
So,
Since I tried to make a motion on this once before, I'll try it again. I'd make a motion to approve ordinance number 560.
okay. There's been a motion made. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Okay, motion's been made and seconded. Is there any additional discussion?
Suspend the rules.
Yes, and suspend the rules?
Please.
Okay, all right. Hearing none, please call the roll.
Alderman Weinmeier,
Yes.
Alderman Montello,
Yes.
Alderman Volkert,
Yes.
Alderman Kraft,
Yes.
Alderman Kittle,
Yes.
Alderman Vries.
Yes.
All right, motion passes. 714, 2022 health insurance process.
Good evening, council. I just wanted to touch on the 2022 health insurance process. So back in June, City Council had authorized staff to request proposals from local and regional health insurance brokers to assist with our healthcare benefits as we go into the 2022 year. We received 5 proposals from both local and regional firms. We did have a review committee consisting of 3 City Council. I want to thank Pete, Mike, and Carrie for participating in that, along with 3 city staff that held interviews with firms over the past several weeks. The review committee consensus was to recommend J.A. Counter for health insurance brokerage service. I don't know if Pete, Mike, or Carrie, you have anything you want to add in regards to the process or that consensus recommendation before I give staff recommendation.
I just want to say this, that every time I sit through those things, which I do as being on the city council and I have at work, my head hurts afterwards. The complexity that is health insurance, what the market is today, the variables that are there. I think it's awesome that we have a local broker who can serve the needs of the community. But it is a, just kind of in general, this is a very large budget item. What health insurance, I think the number was something like, it's close to 20% of the budget. Maybe it's 15 to 16% of the budget is health insurance costs. And I know we're not just talking about that, but that was kind of the main focus. So it's a enlightening process, not altogether pain-free.
I'd make a motion to approve J.A. Counter as our health and ancillary benefits insurance broker.
I'll second that.
Motion's been made and seconded. Is there any further discussion? Please call the roll.
Alderman Montello,
Yes.
Alderman Volkert,
Yes.
Alderman Kraft,
Yes.
Alderman Kittle,
Yes.
Alderman Vries,
Yes.
Alderman Weinmeier.
Yes.
All right, motion passes. We're moving on to 715, Medical Reserve Account Employee Handbook Addendum.
Thank you again, council. So Noah and I maybe will tag team this if you do. So at the November 2020 work session meeting, staff were directed to review policies related to the employee medical reserve account. So an internal staff committee was created with representatives from multiple departments. We met multiple times throughout 2021. And in April, that committee presented to council 3 primary revisions to the policy, which included the timing of the MRA transfer, utilization of the MRA, and then the early retirement component. Council did approve that at that council meeting. What you have in front of you or in your packet is the employee handbook addendum. So it's taking the language that was in the employee handbook and updating it to reflect those approved sections that council had authorized.
So if I can, Sarah, what we're doing is tonight we're going to vote to put language in the handbook that we approved back in April.
Correct.
Okay, does anybody have any questions for Sarah? Somebody want to so move that?
I will, I'll make a recommendation that we approve the MRA language in the employee handbook.
Okay, motion's been made, and there is a second.
Second it.
I hear your second, now you're giving me a third, but is there any further discussion? Please call the roll.
Alderman Volkert,
Yes.
Alderman Kraft,
Yes.
Alderman Kittle,
Yes.
Alderman Vries,
Yes.
Alderman Weinmeier,
Yes.
Alderman Montello.
Yes, thank you, motion passes. Civic Center reservations for outside organizations. So item 716.
So this is a follow-up from a recent city council meeting. We had some discussion about with the question of whether to allow outside groups, again, city boards, committees to reserve the civic center, in particular outside of normal business hours. And so we did reach out to some other communities to see, do other communities allow that? River Falls, Hudson, Altoona, Stillwater, Chippewa Falls, none of them allow reservations of their city hall on nights or weekends for non-city business. The city of Hastings does allow reservations of their city hall at a hourly rate, $40 per hour, subject to staffing availability. They also pay a security deposit when they make that reservation. In the memo, I also just kind of laid out a few other things to think about for our discussion this evening. One of those just, are there other meeting places in the community? Obviously here in Richmond, we have the center, what was WITC, now Northward Tech College, Friday Memorial Library, we have the space, the Casey Hall, Heritage Center, the American Legion. So there are other, and then that also doesn't include private businesses, so the Grayton Room at Champs or some of these other venues. Are there security or liability concerns? Yes, it is possible that if unmonitored, individuals could enter the Civic Center while the building is unlocked. And oftentimes the reservation holder may not know that they're, if someone's in this building or they have a room reserved downstairs and that front door is open, no one's monitoring that to see who's coming into the building. Could city employees staff the building after hours or provide other supervision? Possibly, but again, you're getting into paying overtime rate because now you're going to be paying time and a half for nights, weekends, as well as other benefits for health insurance. They may be arriving early to set up, if there's tables or chairs for that group, any takedown afterwards. And then also thinking about any technology requirements. If someone wanted to use this particular room, we just invested quite a bit of money into the microphones, the monitors on the wall. And then just looking at what rooms can be reserved here in the Civic Center. We have an upstairs conference room, which we primarily use for internal staff meetings. It's by staff offices, staff mailboxes are in close proximity. Our basement large meeting room is really occupied primarily by the senior center, and they have a formal lease agreement with the city of New Richmond. We have a small basement conference room, which is currently used for storage, and then we do have the council chambers here. So the staff recommendation this evening would be to allow outside organizations to use the Civic Center during normal business hours only, unless city staff are otherwise involved in the event as part of their normal job duties. So if there is if St. Clair County wants to have a meeting here for a street project that they're doing, most likely we're going to have city staff present there anyways. Our public works director, some would be available. If there's a Friends of the Library meeting, chances are the library director or another member is going to be at those meetings. We noted that only the council chambers or the small basement conference room would be available. So really trying to use the conference room back by my office really just for internal meetings. And then recognizing that the seniors are set up downstairs for meals. We don't want groups intruding in their space. All reservation requests should be made at least 1 week in advance and should require the completion of a release of liability form. Official city business should always receive priority. So if we have to have a meeting for a board or a committee on short notice, we don't want to have to say, oh, actually we can't do that because such and such group is using it. The city business does have to have priority, and groups have to be aware of that when they make that reservation. And then reservations should be for other government entities, nonprofit groups that directly affect the welfare or benefit of the community. A local business, again, if it's not for sales or promotions, we're not running our business out of the council chambers. But if there's a business that needs a space for a boardroom meeting, that's a different story. And really trying to limit so that it's not personal activities. I don't want to reserve the council chambers to watch the Packer game on the big monitor here because I'm a taxpayer, and so it's trying to make sure that it's, sorry, Craig, that...
Actually, would you clarify, because there happens to be somebody sitting up here that really has no interest in watching the green and gold, but has a really weak aversion to purple and white. So that would be, I think when he said the Packers, he meant the Vikings as well.
Hey,
If you're getting any
all
ideas.
I know is we had a blast last year.
I know that.
So really the, reservations, if there's a nonprofit group in the community wants to have a board meeting, but not doing, hey, it's, we're having a birthday party here in City Hall. So those would be the recommendations from staff. We would also, I guess finally the last bullet I had on there was just maintaining the right to decline a reservation request as well. So
As someone who was very interested in keeping this building open more than closed, after reading your memo and discussing it, I am definitely in favor of the recommendation the staff is making.
Is that a motion? All right, so motion's been made. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Motion's been made and seconded. Is there any further discussion?
Yeah, I just have a couple things. You mentioned in your presentations a bunch of shoulds and a bunch of maybes. We got to firm that up to say can or can'ts. There's got to be musts and must nots, those kind of things. Because should can kind of mean, I want it more definitive. I would like communication with the people that have done this. If it's staff, whoever it is it weekly? Is it monthly? Is it 4 times last year? Just curious on that.
Can I just respond to that? Because last year, and I know you know this, is a bad example because of COVID.
Yep, true.
So pre-COVID, if I understand correctly, there was an event, seniors had an event here every Saturday night, evening. There was cards. I don't know. And I don't know if there was something else on Sundays, but anyhow, you got a valid question. But can I frame that this way? Outside of that, how much requests are there?
Don't know.
Yeah, no, I understand, but I'm saying that outside of what the seniors did here on, I don't know if it was just Saturday nights, and I don't know if there was stuff on Sunday. I've heard people talk about 2 different card games, and I thought they were different times. That's all I mean by that. So
yeah, we've had a mix. I mean, we have the DMV. Used to be here monthly, now it's once a quarter. We've had some program, some of the card groups are actually affiliated with the senior center. In some cases, though, it's just a group of friends that wants to play cards.
But that's all working hours, not the friends that want to play cards. But most of the DMV and most of the seniors are all working hours where they would be permissible to do it with this ordinance in there or not.
Right.
So the after-hour stuff is the things that
for sure
this is really addressing and probably should be addressed. I get that.
Well, actually, I think it's more than that because it also, we're really kind of laying in black and white that the city staff has the ability to say, no, we're not going to let you use space during business hours because it doesn't meet these general purposes here. And I think you're right about the whole should thing. But my understanding is you're just trying to lay out what we see as the philosophy behind how we let this building be used. And I think it's super important for us to acknowledge that I think, quite honestly, the chances of us being liability situation free gets harder every day that goes by when it's after hours. And I think that's important, that last bullet point you had there. If a decision was made to allow something to occur in this building after hours that wasn't city related, if they seek to allow that, the city staff is recommending charging an hourly rate. And just to put that into a dollar, the number that I've heard discussed is $75 an hour. And if you start thinking about wages and benefits, and it's probably time and a half, and it's based on availability. But again, it's incredible when you think, okay, we'll go back to pre-COVID. A lot of times these weekend things that happened here, somebody unlocked the door and have at it, folks. You know, in terms of somebody hanging out downstairs, it's a bad deal. And the way the building is set up just doesn't lend itself well to non-supervision. And that sounds like a weird term if you're talking about the seniors. And I'm talking about building supervision is what I'm talking about. So I think that if, that's really what the story is. So, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, and just a favor to ask, basically, not really anything else. Just if there is somebody, an organization, a company, of people that really want to use the building, just encourage them to use it during the day. I think it's something that should be used by, they pay for it. I mean, it's their building to do what they want with it. They've got to understand that there's liabilities when we're not here. Most people understand that. But just encourage them to just say, we can do that, but we just got to do it during hours. I mean, I'm not going to open up the Dairy Queen at, 12 o'clock at night to play cards and have, a party down there. It's their building to do what they want with some kind of thought to it. So I want them to use the building for any kind of meeting they need the space for. So encourage them to do it during the day and can't really do it during non-business hours.
I think it's a great point. Anybody else got anything? Please call the roll.
Is this a format of an ordinance? This isn't in a format?
No, it would not be an ordinance. We would have, so we would take
Just
just
a
kind of
policy.
Yeah, it's a policy. It's a
okay.
policy.
Yep.
Okay.
Thanks.
Alderman Kraft,
Yes.
Alderman Kittle,
Yes.
Alderman Vreese,
Yes.
Alderman Weinmeier,
Yes.
Alderman Montello,
Yes.
Alderman Volkert.
Yes.
All right, motion passes. 717, remote participation in public meetings by board and commission members.
So in my memo, I kind of give some background of, this was discussed by the council in 2019 before COVID about when it comes to board and commission meetings, council meetings, do you have to have, what is a quorum? Do they all have to be here in person? Can people be on the phone? Can they be on Zoom, GoToMeeting? And that last discussion was really before COVID. And obviously, a lot has changed since then in terms of our use of technology. We've been allowing boards and committees to have participants via phone, via their computer. They're able to participate in conversation. They've been able to vote on matters. But really wanted to bring that back to the council to see, is that something that we wish to continue moving forward? And a lot of communities in their city council or village board have been discussing this. If all of you have seen even the most recent magazine with the League of Municipalities kind of covers that, and every community kind of has a different philosophy or approach to that. So in terms of some possible options for consideration for the council, I kind of laid out a few different possible options. Number one, board members can continue to fully participate remotely as we're currently doing. You could have the entire group could be virtual or on the phone. Number two, we could say that board members have to be physically present to participate, which is really what we had in place prior to COVID. Number three, board members could participate in discussion if they were remote, but they maybe they can't vote on matters. They could still count towards a quorum. Or I'm sorry, they could not vote, they could not count towards a quorum, they could not participate in closed session. So they could basically listen in, but they wouldn't be able to actually vote. Or number 4 that I listed in the memo, it could be a little bit of a combination where board members can participate remotely, but you need to have a quorum physically present in the meeting for the meeting to take place. So, this evening we have 1 member of the council participating on the phone. We have the rest here. We have a quorum. In the case of the council, there's 7 members. We'd have to have 4 members here in person. We could have the rest virtual or via phone.
So
that would put a little bit of weight on the chairperson to make sure that you actually know that you're going to have a quorum there in person. You don't want to think you're going to have a meeting and everybody's on the phone and then that meeting has to get canceled. So
I think what's super important, and I'm just for the record, what I support number 4. And I'll tell you why I support number 4. First of all, we don't know about Delta variant and where that's going. And obviously, whatever we do, we may be changing in a couple months. I hope we don't have to change and go back to something more restrictive, but we don't know. But I do think one of the things that I've learned over the last 6 months that I've been aware of is we've had situations where the folks necessary to constitute a quorum were by phone. And phone contact was lost. Now all of a sudden you can't have a meeting. You have to stop. So I think it's important today, based on the public health situation that we're in today, there's no reason why a quorum can't be present physically. And in fact, I'm supporting they have to be. Members could still attend virtually, but they have to be extraneous to the quorum. There has to be a quorum present. I'm going to keep saying that, sorry. And I think that you can have folks, we've learned that people can attend virtually and they can be in closed session. I mean, that I'm aware of, we haven't had any issues where there's been closed session confidentiality as lost. So I just think that's what I would support. That we allow people to attend virtually, but a quorum has to be present physically, otherwise you're not holding the meeting. That's my opinion.
Is there any flexibility? Is there any flexibility with that, Mike? I just think that, I mean, I know you mentioned the Delta variant and we're not entirely sure what that's going to look like, but I'm imagining worst case scenario, kids quarantined, parents quarantined, people actually, getting ill. I mean, it sounds like that is still a very real possibility. I don't want us to box ourselves into something that we would have to create another policy to get ourselves out of. I mean, I think there has to be some kind of exception. I mean, and if you want to say except in the event of a public health emergency or something, I don't know.
And some communities have done that. They've said, they've kind of clarified what a quorum is, but they've said, the chairperson has that authority if there's a public health situation that would justify having, that virtual participation.
I think that that's fine, but I don't think it's up to the chair of the committee. I think it's up to the city administrator to declare, and I hate to use the word public health emergency, but whatever. You want to call it a code red,
right.
Whatever.
Yeah.
Code blue, sorry, that's death. But the point is that I think, again, if you want to just forget all philosophical approaches and just say from a practical standpoint, and we've had this almost happen a couple times where we had a minimum number, physically and virtual, and then the virtual person, like if they lost phone contact, you go home. And so I'm just saying that to me, unless there's a declaration, and I don't know how you identify that, but unless the city administrator makes that declaration, I think the requirement should be everybody, the quorum has to be there in person. Other members can attend. It's really up to the chair to make sure that they've got that live attendance. And then if this health situation happens, and Lord, please, I hope it doesn't, but if it does, I'm good with that, Carrie. Based on a declaration, because I wouldn't want a committee chairperson saying, well, but really be convenient.
Right.
If I declare this, no, that has to be a citywide declaration that would allow us to go back to allowing quorums to be attained by virtual attendance.
Well, and it should be based on, I mean, obviously, guidance from public health agencies. So whether that's St. Croix County, whether that's, Department of Health for the state of Wisconsin, as I'm putting on.
Way to go.
This is like
She's
super
nervous.
unconscious. I'm like putting on sanitizer now.
I would be careful on that point, though, because we are still in a public health emergency, right? And so, we've got 5 people in the chambers today. Fred's not here. Ron is on the phone, right? So, next week, we have more people that are out that can't attend in person. And we say, well, we're still in a public health emergency and people are out, so we're still going to have a meeting and we're going to allow them to participate, even though we don't have a quorum physically present here. And then the following week, we say, well, now we really want people here in person. We are operating right now within this pandemic, and so if you're going to rely on another declaration from the city administrator or from somebody else to say, well, now we're really in a bad position. Right, so that's where.
Maybe this is premature. I mean, maybe until we get out of, it's still a public health emergency. We still are following guidance from, I think, the CDC, the St. Clair County Public Health. Maybe this is premature.
Well,
Maybe-
and my only question is, we need to know, we need a bright line rule for what quorum is and what quorum is not. Because
Say that again.
we need a bright line rule for what quorum is before we can kick off a public meeting, right? So.
Wait a minute. What? It's a majority of members. I don't understand the question.
Well, I understand, it is right now, but if you move to a policy where you require a quorum in person, then that's different than what the rule is today.
So
And
city
so
council-
what I don't want is any ambiguity in what a quorum is going forward, because we need to make sure that we're able to establish that we've met those quorum requirements.
Can we take 6 months and not worry about it for a while? Can we wait a little bit on, as much as I want people at the meetings, and Noah, you know how I feel about this. We've talked a lot. Maybe it's just too early. Maybe that we can just do it a couple more months or 3-4 more months as we're doing it today. Allow them to do remotely, in person if they're comfortable. Continue to look at it. I want everybody safely in this building to have a meeting. I just feel that there's more contribution, there's more communication, there's more getting done, there's more, even when you're, sometimes when I was at home, it just didn't feel like you were at a meeting. It seemed like you were just going through the motions. I was at a meeting a while back and literally 4 people were on the phone. I heard 100% zero conversation, talk, contribution from any of them. They said yes about 5 times, and then that was the end of the meeting.
It's hard.
I know, and I know
it's
what
hard
you
to
go
kind of
through, and you
break
had to go
in.
through it.
Yeah.
I get it.
Yeah.
I
it's
want
definitely
everybody
hard.
here, but is it too early to really change anything right now? I think it is.
Well, I'll just tell you what my opinion about that is. It's interesting. There are, I got to do the math. There's 6 of us sitting here tonight. We have 3 staff members sitting right there. I'm sorry, 4 with Monica back there. We got 2 people back here. We have somebody in the audience. And guess what, folks? Nobody has a mask on. So I'm saying to you, I understand, but at some point, we're going to have to revert back to a model that's closer to pre-COVID.
I agree.
And I don't know why now isn't the time. I guess my point merely was, if the city administrator declares that we're going to go back to having a less formal attendance policy, because, to Carrie's point, we don't know about Delta, right? We don't know. But certainly kind of the data we have in front of us today, and I'm not sure, that just my opinion, no, my last name isn't Fauci, and I'm thankful for that, COVID, I personally feel, is part of the future. I don't think COVID's going anywhere. We hope it gets to be a lot smaller, but there's nobody suggested that COVID's going away ever. And so, again, I just think this idea, and that point that you just made about being in a meeting where you had, I'm going to say, a majority of members, probably, if we're talking about the park board or something, is 4 of the members. To me, that's just not acceptable. I think people have to have a reason not to be here. That doesn't mean 100% attendance. So you still got some leeway, but there are folks who can make it, and to have a quorum in the room, it's just, you tell me, you're in a committee meeting, and the person that makes the quorum is on the phone, and then you lose them. Can you imagine people saying, okay, I guess we're done now. We just got a little bit we got to get finished here, right? But you can't do it. Meeting's over. So that's what the concern is. Am I drawing a line in the sand? Absolutely not. But I do think at some point, we're going back to.
Nobody in the world, well, nobody here is arguing with you at all about that. My only argument is do we need to do it now? We need to wait a couple months. Do we need to figure this out? Do we need to stand by what we want to do? You know how much I want people here and to contribute. I've said it for a year and a half now. We just couldn't do it.
And I just want to be clear on my comments. If you decide to move in the direction where you require a quorum to physically be here, that's fine. I don't have any issue if the council wants to move in the direction to say, from this point forward, we've got to have a quorum in the room and others can attend virtually. Hudson has gone away with Zoom because they had so many issues with their technology. They've said, we're all back in person, and our consultants can appear by Zoom, but council members have to be in the room. But if you want to move to a structure where quorum is a quorum in the room and others can participate, that's just fine. My only concern is having some other trigger that says, well, you know, council's not going to discuss it. Somebody else is going to declare that we're going to move to a different quorum formula. I don't want to deal with that at this point. What I'd like for the council to do is settle on its quorum policy, and let's try it. Let's work through it, whether it's a status quo or whether it's what's being proposed. And then let's see. Let's try it for the next couple of months and see what Delta brings, and then we go from there.
Yeah, I know that we're going to talk next about timing of some meetings too. I'll be honest, a big part of remote participation for me has been that the meeting times, some of them, not all of them, are outside of what works for people who work. I mean, it just doesn't work when you have a job. So to be here at City Hall, I mean, at meetings 4 o'clock, 4:30, we used to have some meetings at 3:30.
Carrie, if I can, that's next issue on the agenda.
Yes.
I think
yes.
I understand where you're going with that.
Yeah.
But keep in mind, that's not why we're talking about this particular point.
No, it's not. So, I mean, if we want to go back to this, I mean, I would make a motion that we table this discussion until we know more about the public health emergency. I don't feel comfortable right now.
I will second that.
Okay, you have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? And yes, there is. I would propose something different. This is going to be on the agenda every month until we decide we're in the clear. I don't know what's going to happen next month that somebody's going to say, oh, okay, let's talk about it again. I say we talk about it every month, but not just to table it to sometime in the future. So I guess the question is, help me out here.
I vote that, or I put a motion to postpone this discussion until our next regular council meeting.
Okay. And is your second?
I'll second that.
All right, motion's been made and seconded. Any further discussion? Please call the roll.
Alderman Kittle?
Yes.
Alderman Breeze?
Yes.
Alderman Weinmeier?
Yes.
Alderman Montello?
Yes.
Alderman Volkert?
Yes.
Alderman Kraft?
Yes.
All right, thank you. That motion passes. 7:18 City Council work sessions, and I just want to, Noah's going to kind of take this, but I just want to tell y'all, I don't know who I've tried to just kind of pass on this idea that I had, and actually, Craig, you're the one who suggested to me a while ago just talking about philosophically what work sessions are for. And so this particular memo addresses two things. Really, what is the structure of work sessions? And to Carrie's point, when are we going to meet? I think it gets into a whole nother discussion about committee meetings. And I think that's super valid. So with that, Noah, now that I said it all, go ahead.
Well, yeah, so I think breaking the two pieces. One is the start time of our work session meeting. So currently we've been meeting at 5 o'clock. The recommendation, the memo would be to have it 6:30. both for availability for council members to attend, but also for the public. You know, if they want to be able to attend a meeting in person, or whether they're calling in, listening. A lot of people aren't, especially if they commute, they're not getting home at 5 o'clock to participate. So one part of the discussion tonight would be what time for our work sessions. And then, as Mike said, really going back to what is the purpose of the work session meeting, and how do we differentiate between our regular meeting like tonight, where this meeting is being recorded, it's being rebroadcast on cable. We are actually making formal motions, actually voting items, versus what the work sessions really originally started out as, which were really more of an opportunity to have discussion amongst yourselves, not even up on the dais, but more of a roundtable discussion on the floor. Ask questions of staff with the expectation that that discussion item is probably going to be on the upcoming council member where you'd actually vote on it. And so typically, previously, the work session agenda was shorter. I mean, it might be 2 or 3 items, and it might be a half-hour discussion on each one, you know, but it might be focused on the budget, or it might be focused on economic development, where I think in part just because there's been so much business moving forward, that a lot of our work session items have basically become another regular session where we've been voting items. And obviously there's some things that are time sensitive where, you know, there may be a request, but again, we really want to be proactive and be planning to know that, hey, they're not voting at those meetings. If there's things that are time sensitive, we have to be able to plan accordingly. And really trying to limit the work session, again, to more of discussion, more informal format. So just wanted to kind of open the floor for, you know, questions, discussion amongst yourselves. This doesn't require a vote tonight, but really just want direction for our August work session already of first what time, and then really what that format is going forward.
And I want to add to that. I think that, you know, certainly for some folks who have been on this body for a while, can think about a work session meeting and starting at 6:30 and, you know, late and getting done early and all that kind of thing. But I think that it's not just about working people who serve in the council, and sorry, that sounds bad, but people who have, I didn't mean anything, Craig, gainful employment where they have to be somewhere at a particular time. But it's also about the public being able to attend. And I think the idea that we did do that for a while, where we had tables set up and around, and we were able to kind of dive into issues. And I think in a perfect world, if the timing of the one-way street by the middle school was different, that's something that you would talk about at a work session. And then you've got, I don't know, what is it, 3 weeks maybe to maybe you need to talk to some folks in your district. Maybe you need to do some research. But really, it's incumbent upon staff, if we adopt the philosophy of this, to say, okay, I'm not putting that on the agenda for the work session because it doesn't need to be voted on right then. It can wait. And so, my hope is, and maybe I'm Pollyannish here, that work sessions could be shorter because we're not doing all of the other business that's getting more of that motions is getting saved for. And it's not fair to the public. Folks can watch tonight. They don't get to watch work sessions. So I would just like to see them be more informational in nature, research-oriented. That's my thoughts. So how do you all weigh in?
Well, I'll just weigh in, and first I'll start off by apologizing because when I got on the council, there were no work sessions. We didn't have any work sessions. Very, very rarely did we have anything that we met except once a month, except our boards and commissions, they would work.
Right.
And I talked to the city administrator at the time, and I said, can we just, because I was new, I didn't know a lot of things that were going on and how we did it yesterday, how we would want to do it tomorrow. I just wanted to meet with the council just to say, what do you think? What do you think about this? What do you think about that? How should we do this? How should we do that? Not really concrete stuff, just thoughts, ideas, futures, projections. What are we going to do? Years. It's my fault.
That's what I'm hearing.
Yes.
Why you started
But
by
it
apologizing.
it turned into a full agenda that we do too much stuff on, and instead of ideas, it's turned into policies, and then it's turned into whatever. And I don't want government to work slower. It's kind of nice to have a certain amount of items on there that you need to expedite. There's going to be things in work sessions that, even if it's a consent agenda item that really can't wait, or a constituent or a person or a company or business wants to come in and say, we really would like to get this thing done now, maybe that's a good work session item. But I don't want it to, I want it to turn into, and if we have a work session every other month to talk about the future and the budgets and what we see this city looking like in 10 years. That's what my original plan was, or my thoughts were, to have a work session, is to think about the future and what we all believed in and what we all wanted to see in that the city looked like. And it turned into more than that. It turned into, well, let's get that done and let's do this and we can do that tomorrow. So yeah, it's not my fault, but it's my ideas.
I think you said it was your fault, though.
Well, okay, so it was my fault.
I have a couple of thoughts on this, being kind of the new person on the council, that I couldn't tell the difference between a regular council meeting, because I was kind of wondering what that was about. I understand that sometimes there are deadlines, and it's nice to be some approvals for the plan commission. My gosh, we've got tremendous amount of growth happening in Richmond right now, and we want to stay weather and whatever other cases might be. But I think that the city's work is done at the committee level, approval at the council meeting. So when we talk about work sessions, I understand what you're saying about it's a place where we can, do long-range planning and this and that sort of thing. But if Mike's on a committee and he has done all of the work and the investigation, and I read those committee minutes and question about it, I can go to Mike and talk to him about that prior to the council meeting where we voted on. And I don't want to second guess whatever committee Mike has been on, because they've done all the due diligence. They've done the work. So I'm not sure what the work sessions really are going to look like. It seems to me that work ought to be done at the committee level.
I think that's a great point, and
But a committee thing can't be a full-blown city thought, or
No,
a city plan, or a city idea, or a philosophy that we want to go by.
Yeah.
And the work sessions, like I said, maybe we don't have to meet once a month for a work session.
Right.
Maybe it can be in every other thing. Maybe we can have speakers come in and say, maybe we can have the River Falls or Hudson Chamber of Commerce or a council member come in and say, hey, here's how we do it in Hudson. How do you guys do it in Richmond? Or have that's more of a work session item to me. Or we had a planner come in that was working with Prescott and kind of doing some TIF districts down there and getting things going down in the Prescott area. And a speaker to come in, can't remember his name.
a couple years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That kind of thing, I think,
Yep.
is a work session item.
Yeah, I think that,
Strategic planning.
yeah, strategic planning, there you go. I think the idea of what I hope you're hearing or you're getting from this, Noah, is that there is a desire for us to reframe what work sessions represent. And as I said before, it's incumbent upon staff to, kind of think differently about, okay, I think what you said was you got on the council, there was no work sessions to speak of. And then we're having them 10 times a year and not thinking about it of being a second council meeting. And I think this idea, part of it, from what's been said to me is, council meetings can get long. Here it is almost, we're 2.5 hours in, and that's understandable. But I think a little bit to Pete's point about, committees do this work, and I think the easiest way to say it is we have to start thinking differently if we want to achieve something differently, and really having that horseshoe design, I guess it's kind of a square, where we're talking to each other about these issues. And so I just think we don't know completely what we want it to look like, but I think what you're hearing is we want it to look different. So,
And we may not need it every month.
Right.
We may not need 10 of them.
yeah, so I think that's a good thing. And I think as I look at the 4 of you, I don't think any one of you, the 5 of you, the 6 of you, Craig, the 8 of you in the back of the room, I don't think any of you are voting, dang, we're going to have a night we don't have to be down at City Hall. Darn it. So anyhow, but are
I
you,
just wanted to ask on the starting time, does
I,
6:30
I,
work?
I like
or
starting later. Then I can get supper in.
6:30, 7, is there preference?
6:30.
I think 6:30 is a good time.
Stay with Wednesdays.
I have a completely different opinion. I like
But you understand for folks,
sessions are going to be much less.
that's the hope. But again, the idea
easy
is,
for everyone
but,
also,
and it isn't just people on the council, although that's a consideration, but for the public who wants to come and attend, right? Let's say, for example, at the next work session, we're going to talk about culling. This is the police chief's favorite topic, culling the deer herd into Richmond. We got to make sure people can get here. And 5 o'clock just doesn't work for a lot of folks. So
If it's important, they'll
yeah,
be here.
well, 6:30, I think, is what you're hearing. So, all right, any further discussion about that?
No, I'll check my schedule and see if I'm good at 6:30.
You're gonna miss some episodes of The Bachelor and
It's already half
Bachelorette.
over
I
and it's
know.
the finale
I'm
tonight.
just-
Come on, let's go.
I got 3 letters to say DVR. Anyhow, is there any further discussion about this? All right, then that's it. Is there any communication to miscellaneous?
I just wanted to highlight a couple of things briefly. Wanted to thank Rand and the Finance Department for all their work on the audit with the Moody's call last week. Obviously, getting the favorable interest rate. Kudos to their whole team for a job really well done. And then also wanted to give our city clerk an opportunity. Obviously, some of you, and obviously here at City Hall, we've gotten a lot of questions about revaluation. Just wanted to give Michelle an opportunity if you want to give your kind of your 1-minute commercial for those who may be watching.
My 1-minute commercial is that open book starts tomorrow at noon. It is by appointment, so we avoid having crowds hanging out together in the Civic Center. There will be computers set up for people to come in and use and go through the roll book if they're looking for comps or just curious where other homes in their neighborhood have landed. But that's available. I can also email a link directly to anyone. It's on Accurate Assessor's website so that anybody at home can also look through the roll book. Once open book ends, it's open Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. If people don't have the time to make an appointment in person or by phone, you can still have your assessment reviewed all the way through September 12th. And so if you feel that the way your home was assessed, you would not be able to sell your home for, please reach out. And anyone who has questions about mill rate, we've got a really great picture. And I love talking about mill rate.
That was really good.
Yeah, we call that the scales of justice.
Yes, thank you.
But I am curious, so is it the 12th of September is when the Board of Review is?
No, Board of Review is September 15th. And
Okay.
so you have to have 48 hours beforehand that you can resolve anything and then make those appointments for Board of Review. So,
And just out of curiosity, do the appointments you have for open book, is there a bunch?
lots.
Okay.
There's lots still available.
And it's interesting, though, that if folks can do the exact same thing at home, because you can send them a link, I mean,
Correct.
that's something we definitely want to get out to people. And for what it's worth, when I get some of this memo stuff, like that really nice graph you put together, I put it on my aldermanic Facebook page, and I think that's just great information for us to have. But I want to commend you for the work that you've done, and I know it's not just you, so whoever else is part of that team, Michelle, it's a great job. I know being at the neighborhood block party, I guess I'm going to call it that, a national night out, the one that I got to, it was a bit of a topic of discussion that folks were talking about their different assessments, and the one comment that was pretty common was, my assessment went up this much percent. Boy, I hope my taxes aren't going up. And so that's going to be a lot of fun.
It's going to be fun.
Over the next 3 days, and then the next month, I wish those of you that are serving on the Board of Review. But just because you brought it up, I want to also recognize Rayanne and your staff for the work that you've done. I think the bond call that we got is a direct reflection of the work that you've done. And I want to commend the council, and I'm kind of loath to do this because politicians patting themselves on the back, kind of a icky practice. So, but I just will say that it's been a good philosophy, and with your guiding hand, I think that has a lot to do with why the bond call that we got is, and it's incredible, and the savings, and just kind of the general philosophy, I think it's great. But we have some other city staff that have been through some tough times, whether you want to talk about COVID or more recent events. And so good job to everybody. These are not for the faint of heart. And I think about last year when COVID started and kind of how we were like, holy cats, what are we going to do? We've got to, and as we've talked about, it's not over, but I appreciate the steady hand that y'all have provided. We got great employees at City Hall and in the city in general. And so, to go throughout and just good job to all of you. So thank you for your efforts. All right. Anything else under communication miscellaneous? And actually, did somebody want to make just a quick word about I think there was 3, I'm going to call them block parties, National Night Outs.
I was just going to say thank you to the staff that helped, and I'm guessing Michelle and Beth and Lori, and I'm not sure who the entire team was that put out the Facebook notifications, coordinated the blockades coming out, the police and fire. We had a great showing at our National Night Out in our neighborhood. So we did neighborhood-based. I would say we had at least 50 people, if not more, when you're counting kiddos, and they were super excited to have police there. Fire, EMS, we had Storm, right, the canine. We also had somebody dressed up as a Dalmatian, I believe, from the fire department, and some popsicles. So yeah, it was fantastic. So thank you so much, and I hope that it's something that we can continue doing.
That was great events for the ones
We've
that I
already
went to.
started planning for next year.
Awesome.
And we're going to go with frozen popsicles, not slushy ones, but they're delicious either way.
So next year, Aaron from the police department was a big part of our team also. So he kind of
Thank you,
got
Aaron.
emergency services together. And so really what we did was just do some posting, but we want to do next year's improve on that. We do believe that the parks, we thought it was a good idea. It didn't work out so well. So next year we're going to start it a month and a half before when we started it, obviously, and look towards block parties and let people do them in their own neighborhoods. That's really what National Night Out is about. And so we'll publicize it more. We'll have them also get in contact with us. Who's your lead person for this block party? We'll make sure that you have barricades, and we might keep it to a minimum number, like the first 10 groups to do a block party. We'll do it because the police services and the fire, they can't get to everybody if everybody has. So with Aaron's help, next year we'll probably start it earlier, and then we'll guide them to a certain number of block parties so that the emergency services can get to everyone. But kind of go away from the parks. We just threw it at parks this year because it was like, hey, what if they do this?
It was a great idea.
Yeah.
I just think nobody wanted to step forward to be the lead.
The lead, yep.
They were like, I'll show up, but I need somebody to
I was a
kind of
little
lead
late
that.
in getting there, but I went to 2 different parks and there was nobody at either one.
Yeah,
Yeah, I think
I did a drive-by.
the ones that lasted, well, there was 3, I think, that happened. And the 2 that I know of that definitely lasted the longest
Comment, Craig.
is the neighborhood parties, the ones that were in a neighborhood. That's where folks really seem to stay. And Chief, I did have somebody ask me the intoxicated glasses to simulate being drunk. Somebody asked me if they happened to be inebriated and they put those on, would they be able to walk straighter? So
It's like the opposite.
Well, those will actually, if you wear them long enough, you will get queasy. I can guarantee you that. They actually are pretty good. Pretty
simulators.
good tool, yeah. pretty good
Simulators.
simulation, But,
All right.
I know our folks that participated had a great time. They were really welcomed into the parties. I know that there was some bags being thrown at, and a little fire department, police department competition. I believe the police department cleaned up on that. I may not have said that with the firefighters in the room earlier. And then their dog refused to race our dog. In a
Yeah,
race.
imagine that.
Otherwise, I think we would have been 2-time champions that night as well. So, but yeah, we look forward to that. I think the National Night Out this year, thanks to Beth and her team, was kind of on shorter notice. It turned out to be a really good experience. We've hosted that at the police department, which is not what National Night Out is supposed to be. I think we did disappoint a few local groups that normally come to National Night Out and set up a booth.
They were
and-
mostly, oh, sorry. I was going to say they were mostly people in my neighborhood, I think. They just wanted the hot dogs and stuff.
So no, thanks to the VFW too for cooking all the hot dogs up at
Mary
Mary
Park.
Park, and I know they had the root beer floats I may or may not have had one or two of those. But no, it was a fantastic evening, so thanks to everybody.
That's awesome. All right, is there anything else?
Now I'll make a motion that we go into closed session per, do I have to read this?
Go ahead.
Okay.
Go ahead and read it.
Closed session per Wisconsin statute 19.851C, considering employment, promotion, compensation, or performance evaluation data of any public employee over which the governmental body has jurisdiction or exercises responsibility.
All right, motion's been made and seconded. Is this a roll call? All in favor?